Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was reincarnated in DxD and got married to Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Fox in the Devil's Garden. The scent of rain-soaked earth and roses was the first thing he remembered of this life. It was a stark contrast to the dust, blood, and ozone of his last. Here, in the sprawling gardens of the Gremory estate, crimson flowers bloomed under a sky that was perpetually twilight, a soft, bruised purple that held 1,000 silver stars in its depths. Naruto Uzumaki, now taller, with the same unruly blonde hair but eyes that held the placid depth of an ancient sea rather than the boisterous blue of his youth, drew in a slow breath. The energy of this world, demonic, holy, and everything in between, thrummed against his senses, a constant, low hum that had long ago replaced the familiar pulse of natural chakra. He had learned to convert it, to mold it. His own internal energy, the vast, sun-bright ocean of the nine-tailed fox, had integrated with this world's power, creating something unique, something that was neither purely demonic nor purely chakra. It was his, and his alone. A light footstep on the gravel path behind him broke his reverie. He didn't need to turn. He knew the soft, almost silent tread, the faint scent of expensive tea and something uniquely, fiercely Rias. Hiding from my father's political lectures again, Naruto. Rias Gremory's voice was a melodic tease, but he could hear the faint tremor of anxiety beneath it. She came to stand beside him. Her own crimson hair a breathtaking cascade against the deep green of the foliage, a stark and beautiful contrast to the muted light of the underworld. He offered a small smile without looking at her. Lord Gremory is a good man, Rias. But he speaks of alliances and bloodlines as if they are architectural blueprints. It's clinical. Rias sighed, the sound a soft puff of air. She leaned her shoulder against his, a familiar, comforting gesture they had shared since they were children, ever since her father had found a lost, bewildered boy with an impossible power signature wandering the forests bordering their territory. They had grown up together, two sides of a strange coin. She, the heiress to a great devil clan, burdened by expectation. He, the anomaly, the outsider with no past in this world, burdened by the memories of another. He's getting worse, she murmured, her gaze fixed on a perfect, dew-kissed rose. The elders are pressuring him. They say I'm of age. That I need to secure the Gremory future. Naruto's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He knew what that meant. An arranged marriage. A political union designed to strengthen a bloodline, with no regard for the person at its center. He had fought a war to give his friends the freedom to choose their own futures. The idea of Rias being sold like a prize mare turned his stomach. "And what do you want?" he asked, his voice low and steady. It was the only question that mattered. Rias fell silent for a long moment. He could feel the turmoil radiating from her, the conflict between her duty as a Gremory and her own heart's desires. "I want this," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "I want to stay here, with you, with Akeno, with everyone. I want my life to be my own." She finally turned to look at him. Her blue-green eyes wide and pleading. "They don't see me, Naruto. They see the power of destruction. They see a womb to carry on the Gremory name." Before he could answer, another presence joined them. This one heralded by the faint crackle of static electricity and the scent of sweet perfume. My, such a serious conversation on such a lovely evening. Akeno Himahima glided to a stop on Rias's other side. Her long black hair tied in its signature ponytail, a gentle, almost sad smile playing on her lips. Her violet eyes, so often filled with mischief, held a deep, knowing sympathy as she looked at Rias. Then, her gaze shifted to Naruto, and a spark of something else ignited within them, a shared understanding of being different, of harboring a power that others feared or coveted. Council is pushing the Phoenix arrangement again, aren't they?" Akeno asked, her tone losing its playful edge. Rias shuddered. Riser Phoenix. The man who regenerates from any wound, who sees his peer. Age as a harem and prospective fiancés as additions to his collection. They think it's a perfect match. Power for power. Naruto's silence was heavy, a palpable thing that drew both of their gazes. He had seen men like Rias before. Arrogant, entitled, convinced of their own superiority because of an accident of birth. They were the kind of men who broke things just to watch them shatter, who saw people as tools or trophies. He is not worthy of you, Naruto stated simply. It wasn't a platitude, it was a fact. His power is a gimmick. His character is a void. He would not cherish you. He would possess you. Rias's eyes welled with tears, and she quickly blinked them away. But what can I do? To refuse is to insult a pillar of the underworld. It could cause a political incident. Politics or a conversation, Naruto said, finally turning to face them both. His gaze was calm, unwavering, and held a certainty that seemed to settle the very air around them. And conversations can be changed. Or ended. Akeno's smile returned, this time with a genuine, dangerous edge. Now that sounds more interesting. What are you thinking, Naruto-kun? He looked from Akeno's eager curiosity to Rias's desperate hope. In their faces, he saw the family he had built in this life, the people he had sworn to himself he would protect. The ghosts of his past, of Sakura, Kakashi, Sasuke, of a world saved at a cost he still carried, whispered a reminder. True strength wasn't just about power, but about the will to use it for those you love. I'm thinking, he said, his voice as soft as the twilight, that it's time the underworld learned that the House of Gremory has a guardian it has long underestimated. He reached out, placing a hand on Rias's shoulder. His touch was warm, and a wave of calm washed over her. A familiar sensation she had come to associate with him. It was the feeling of absolute safety, of an unshakable mountain standing between her and the storm. Let them bring Rias, he said. Let them make their proposals. I will handle it. 2 days later, the grand hall of the Gremory Palace was a suffocating tableau of political theater. Devils of high station milled about. Their conversations a low murmur of gossip and posturing. Lord and Lady Gremory stood near the central dais, their faces etched with forced cordiality. Rias was beside them, a vision in a deep red gown. Her expression a perfect mask of polite indifference that Naruto knew cost her dearly to maintain. Akeno, in her shrine maiden-esque attire, was a step behind, her smile fixed but her eyes missing their usual spark. Naruto stood near a pillar in the shadows at the edge of the room, observing. He was dressed in a simple, well-tailored black suit, a stark contrast to the flamboyant attire of the other devils. He was an enigma to most of the people here. He held no official rank, was not a member of Rias's peerage, yet he moved with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged. The Gremorys treated him like a son. Rias and Akeno like their closest confidant. It was a puzzle most were too proud to try and solve, dismissing him as a favored pet or a curiosity. That was their mistake. The great doors of the hall swung open, and a wave of oppressive, fiery energy washed over the room. Rias had arrived. He strode in as if he already owned the place, a cocky smirk plastered on his face. He was handsome in a conventional way, with short blonde hair and a lean, muscular build. He was flanked by several members of his peerage, all women who looked at him with a mixture of adoration and fear. Lord Gremory, a pleasure, Rias boomed, his voice grating on Naruto's nerves. He bypassed Rias's father and went straight for her, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. And my beautiful Rias, even more ravishing than the portraits suggest. You will make a fine addition to Rias's collection. The word, collection, hung in the air, a vulgar stain on the gilded atmosphere. Rias flinched, pulling her hand back as if burned. Lord Gremory's jaw twitched, but he held his tongue. Naruto felt a cold, familiar stillness settle over him. It was the calm before the storm, Razor's edge of focus he had only ever found in the heat of battle. He watched as Rias continued his preening, dismissing Rias's obvious discomfort as shyness, boasting of his own power and prestige. He was a peacock, all flash and no substance. We have much to discuss, of course, Rias said, waving a dismissive hand. The details of the union, the combining of our assets. But first, Rias Mew. Saint sample the wine of the House of Gremory. He was turning away when his eyes landed on Naruto for the first time. He scanned him up and down, a flicker of contempt in his gaze. And who is this? A servant? Before anyone could answer, Naruto pushed himself off the pillar and walked forward, his steps silent on the marble floor. He moved with an unhurried grace that drew every eye in the room. He stopped a few feet from Riser. His expression unreadable. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the murmuring hall. "I am a guest in this house. And you are a guest as well. You should act like one." Riser blinked, then let out a short, barking laugh. "A guest with a mouth. And what does that mean, boy?" "It means you will show respect to your hosts," Naruto continued, his gaze unwavering. "Especially to Lady Rias." The smirk on Riser's face vanished, replaced by a sneer. "Rias will be my wife. Riser will treat his property as he sees fit. It is not your place to speak, you nameless stray." Quote. A ripple of shock went through the assembled devils. To be so openly disrespectful in the Grimoire Hall was a serious breach of etiquette. But Riser was a Phoenix, and his family's regenerative abilities made him legendarily arrogant. Rias took a step forward, her hands clenched into fists. "Naruto is my family, Riser. You will not speak to him that way." Riser's eyes widened in mock surprise. "Family. Oh, I see. He's the pet. Don't worry, my dear. Once we are married, I will teach you the difference between family and furniture." That was it. The final line. Naruto didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He let a tiny, almost infinitesimal sliver of his true power leak out. It wasn't fiery like Phoenix energy or destructive like Grimoire energy. It was something else entirely. It felt ancient, vast, and utterly overwhelming, like the pressure at the bottom of the deepest ocean. The wine glasses on nearby tables trembled. The torches flickering on the walls flared wildly. For a split second, every devil in the room felt a primal, instinctual fear, the kind a mouse feels when a hawk's shadow passes over it. Riser staggered back a step, his eyes wide with disbelief. The oppressive aura vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but the impression remained. "You speak of marriage and unions," Naruto said, his voice still level, "but those are things that must be earned. They are not trophies to be claimed." Riser, recovering his bravado, snarled. "Earned? Who are you to speak of earning anything? Riser is a Phoenix. My blood is my right. Your blood is a parlor trick," Naruto countered, the insult delivered with the chilling precision of a scalpel. "It lets you put yourself back together after you've been broken. True power ensures you are not broken in the first place." The hall was dead silent now. This was no longer a political negotiation. It was a direct challenge. Lord Grimoire finally stepped forward, his expression grave. "Riser. Naruto. That is enough." "No," Naruto said, his eyes never leaving Riser's. "It's not enough. A matter of this importance cannot be settled with boasts and threats." He turned his head slightly, addressing Lord Grimoire but ensuring everyone heard. "The old ways have merit. When a dispute cannot be resolved through words, it is resolved through strength. Let this be settled in a rating game." Another wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. A formal challenge. Riser stared at him, then threw his head back and laughed, a loud, ugly sound. You challenge me, you, who have no peerage, no rank, no name. On what grounds?" "On the grounds that I am defending Rias's honor and her right to choose," Naruto said. He then looked directly at Rias, a silent question in his eyes. She met his gaze, and in that moment, all her fear and uncertainty vanished, replaced by a surge of strength. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. That was all the confirmation he needed. "I will fight you and your entire peerage," Naruto declared, his voice resonating with quiet power. "Alone." The arrogance of the statement was breathtaking. Riser's laughter died in his throat, replaced by furious indignation. "Alone? You face my 15 pieces alone? You are insane." "Then it should be an easy victory for you," Naruto replied coolly. "Unless, of course, you are afraid." The taunt was expertly aimed. Riser's pride was his greatest weakness. To refuse now, after being challenged so publicly, would be a stain on the Phoenix name. His face contorted with rage. "Fine," he spat. "Fine, you pathetic stray. Riser will accept your challenge. I will burn you to ashes so thoroughly that even my family's flames won't be able to find a piece to regenerate. We will have the rating game in 3 days. I will enjoy breaking you before I claim my bride." Naruto simply inclined his head. "The Grimoire family thanks you for your visit, Lord Phoenix. You may see yourself out." With a final, venomous glare, Riser turned on his heel and stormed out of the hall, his peerage scrambling to follow. The moment the doors closed, a collective breath was released. The hall erupted into frantic whispers. Rias rushed to Naruto's side, her eyes shining with a mixture of terror and overwhelming gratitude. "Naruto, are you sure?" she breathed. "His whole peerage, and his immortality." "Rias," he said, his voice softening as he looked at her. He reached up and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "When have I ever made a promise to you that I didn't keep?" Akeno joined them, her usual smile replaced by a look of fierce admiration. "That was quite the performance, Naruto-kun. His blood is a parlor trick. I thought Lord Phoenix was going to burst a blood vessel." Naruto's expression remained calm. He relies on his regeneration to make up for a lack of skill and strategy. It makes him reckless, and reckless men are easy to defeat. Lord Gremory approached, his face a complex mask of pride, worry, and awe. "Naruto, what you did was unprecedented. You have the full support of our house. But are you certain you wish to do this alone? Rias's peerage is not ready," Naruto finished gently, saving Rias the difficulty of admitting it. Her peerage was new, incomplete, and inexperienced. They would be slaughtered, and this is not their fight. This is personal. "Let me handle this, my lord. I will not fail." Zeodicus Gremory looked at the young man before him, the boy he had found so many years ago. He had always known Naruto was special, that his power was something extraordinary. But this was a display of will and confidence that rivaled that of the four great Saiyans. He placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. "The fate of my daughter is in your hands," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of that trust. "Do not lose." Naruto met his gaze, and in his eyes, the Devil Lord saw not the bravado of a youth, but the unflinching certainty of a veteran warrior. "I won't." 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. While Naruto himself seemed perfectly calm, spending his time in quiet meditation in the gardens, the Gremory estate was a hive of activity. Sears X Lucifer, Rias's older brother and one of the four great Saiyans, had arrived to oversee the official raiding game. He had a private meeting with Naruto, from which he emerged looking thoughtful and deeply impressed. The arena for the battle was a pocket dimension, a perfect replica of Kuo Academy, the school Rias attended in the human world. It was a familiar terrain for her, but a neutral one for the combatants. Naruto stood in the replicated student council room, which served as his starting headquarters. He was alone, as promised. He wore a simple black combat outfit, practical and unadorned. On a screen before him, the faces of Rias, Akeno, and her peerage watched from an observation room, their faces tight with anxiety. "Naruto, be careful," Rias said, her voice tight. "Don't underestimate him." He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Worrying doesn't suit you, Rias. Just watch." Graphia Lucifuge, Sears X's wife and the game's announcer, spoke through the communication system, her voice formal and cold. "The raiding game between Riser Phoenix and Naruto Uzumaki will now begin." The screen flickered, showing the layout of the campus. Riser's 15 pieces, his queen, rooks, knights, bishops, and pawns, appeared as red dots spread across the school grounds, a textbook pincer formation designed to overwhelm a single opponent. Naruto was a single blue dot in the student council office. "Let the game begin." The moment the words were spoken, Naruto vanished. Not in a burst of speed, but with a flicker, like a candle flame snuffed out. In the observation room, everyone gasped. His blue dot had disappeared from the map. Where did he go? Issei Hyodo, Rias's new pawn, asked in bewilderment. Akeno leaned forward, her eyes wide. "He's masking his presence entirely. Not even the game system can track him. It's like he ceased to exist." On the battlefield, Riser's peerage advanced cautiously. They knew their opponent was alone, but the sheer audacity of the challenge had put them on edge. 4 of his pawns entered the main school building, sweeping through the hallways. Naruto was perched silently on the roof, his energy suppressed to nothing. He watched them enter, his mind a whirlwind of calculations. He could sense their energy signatures, their movements, their formations. It was like his old sensory skills, but amplified. He created a single clone, a perfect replica, that split off from him without a puff of smoke, a silent and flawless technique he had refined over years. The clone dropped to the ground floor, while Naruto remained on the roof. The clone walked into the center of the first-floor hallway and deliberately flared its energy. "There he is," one of the pawns shouted. The 4 pawns converged, their weapons drawn. The clone simply stood there and formed a familiar, swirling sphere of blue energy in its hand. A Rasengan. But this one was different. It was infused with his unique demonic energy, crackling with an unstable, violet light. "Take him." The pawns charged. The clone thrust the Rasengan forward. It didn't explode on impact. Instead, it expanded, creating a vortex of violent, grinding energy that pulled all 4 of them in. There was a brief, terrible scream. And then silence. 4 pawns, retired, Graphia's voice announced, devoid of emotion. In his command center, Riser slammed a fist on the table. How? What was that technique? Before he could process it, chaos erupted elsewhere. On the athletic field, his 2 knights were suddenly set upon by a volley of what looked like spears made of pure wind. They were fast, sharp, and relentless. The knights, proud of their speed, were forced onto the defensive, unable to pinpoint their attacker. Naruto, still on the main building's roof, was making minute hand gestures. He wasn't throwing anything. He was manipulating the very air, shaping it into blades, a far more refined and deadly version of his old wind-style jutsu. One knight stumbled, and a wind blade sliced cleanly through her defenses. One knight retired. The other knight, panicked, tried to flee, only to run straight into the path of Naruto's clone, which had reformed in the hallway and emerged onto the field. Another Rasengan, and she was gone. One knight retired. 6 pieces, gone in less than 5 minutes. This is a massacre. Kiba Yuto, Rias's knight, breathed from the observation room. Riser was panicking now. All remaining pieces, converge on the main building. Find him and destroy him. His 2 rooks, his bishops, and his remaining 4 pawns all charged towards the school. It was exactly what Naruto wanted. He dropped from the roof into the courtyard, landing silently in the center of the converging forces. For the first time, they saw him in the flesh. "There you are." One of the rooks, a large, armored woman, roared. Charging at him, Naruto didn't move. He simply held up a hand. A massive, translucent barrier of golden energy shimmered into existence around him. The rook's saint slammed into it and she was thrown back, her arm shattering. The barrier didn't even ripple. It was an application of his energy that was neither offense nor defense, but absolute negation. One rook retired. From the back, the bishops began chanting, unleashing powerful streams of demonic fire. Naruto's barrier dissolved, and he simply walked through the flames, which parted around him as if afraid to touch him. He moved then, a blur of motion. He didn't use grand techniques. A simple, precise chop to the neck of a pawn. A disabling strike to a bishop's leg. He flowed through them like water. His movements economical and devastatingly effective. He was a shinobi again, a master of taijutsu, and these devils, so reliant on their brute power and flashy spells, had no answer for his martial prowess. In under a minute, the courtyard was littered with the defeated bodies of Riser's peerage. 4 pawns, retired. 2 bishops, retired. 1 rook, retired. Silence. On the battlefield, only Riser and his queen, Yubeluna, remained. Naruto stood calmly in the courtyard, not even breathing heavily. He looked up, his gaze seeming to pierce the very fabric of the pocket dimension, straight at the camera recording him. "It's just you and me now, Riser," he said, his voice broadcast throughout the arena. "Come and face me, or are you going to hide behind your last piece?" In his command room, Riser was trembling with rage and disbelief. His entire, prized peerage, defeated by a single, unknown entity. His pride was in tatters. "Yubeluna, we're going," he roared, teleporting with his queen directly to the courtyard. Yubeluna, a powerful mage, immediately launched a massive explosive spell. A ball of pure destructive energy the size of a small house screamed towards Naruto. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He held up one hand and a black sphere, no bigger than a marble, appeared in his palm. It shot forward and collided with the spell. Instead of an explosion, the black sphere simply absorbed the attack, swallowing it whole without a sound. It was the principle of his truth-seeking orbs, adapted. A perfect nullification of all forms of energy-based attacks. Yubeluna stared, her jaw agape. Impressive, Naruto said, his tone conversational, but a waste of energy. He vanished. He reappeared directly behind her, one hand resting gently on the back of her neck. She froze, feeling a terrifying concentration of power under his palm. Yield, Naruto said softly. Yubeluna, for all her pride, was no fool. She knew she was beaten. I yield. Queen, retired, Graphia announced. Now, it was just the two of them. Naruto stood 20 feet from Riser, his hands tucked in his pockets. Riser's body was wreathed in golden flames. You think you've won, he screamed, his face a mask of fury. You cannot kill me. I am a phoenix. I am immortal, he charged, throwing massive fireballs. Naruto sidestepped them easily, his movements fluid and relaxed. He made no move to attack, simply dodging everything Riser threw at him. Your immortality is a crutch, Naruto said, his voice calm as he weaved between pillars of fire. It has made you lazy. You have no real skill, no finesse. You just throw power around, expecting your regeneration to cover your mistakes. Shut up, Riser shrieked, his attacks growing more frantic and wild. He managed to land a glancing blow, and a burst of fire consumed Naruto's side. In the observation room, Rias cried out. But as the flames cleared, Naruto stood there, completely unharmed. The flames of a phoenix, which could melt steel, had done nothing. My energy protects me, Naruto explained, as if lecturing a child. It is older and purer than yours. Your fire is like a child's tantrum against the ocean. He decided to end it. He raised a single finger. A dense, swirling vortex of wind and demonic energy, a Rasenshuriken, formed above it, screaming like 1,000 banshees. It was not the massive, destructive version he had used in his old life. This was small, controlled, and infinitely more lethal. This will not kill you, Riser, Naruto said, his eyes turning cold. But it will hurt, and it will sever your connection to your demonic energy so completely. You won't even be able to regenerate a paper cut for the next month. Riser's eyes widened in terror. The ability to regenerate was the core of his identity. To lose it, Naruto threw the attack. It crossed the distance in a fraction of a second. It didn't explode. It struck Riser, and on a microscopic level, countless tiny wind blades sliced into every single cell of his body, severing the pathways of his demonic energy. Riser collapsed, screaming, not in pain, but in pure, unadulterated terror. He tried to heal, to summon his flames, but nothing happened. He was powerless. He was mortal. Naruto walked over and stood above him. He didn't kick him or mock him. He just looked down at the broken, whimpering devil. Do you surrender? Yes, I surrender. I give up. Riser sobbed, a pathetic wreck. Riser Phoenix has surrendered, Graphia's voice echoed in the silent arena. The winner is Naruto Uzumaki. The pocket dimension dissolved, and they were all back in the main observation hall. The moment they materialized, Rias ran to Naruto, throwing her arms around him in a fierce hug. He stumbled back a step, surprised by the force, before wrapping his own arms around her, holding her tight. You did it, she whispered into his chest, her voice thick with emotion. You really did it. Akeno was right behind her, a brilliant, genuine smile on her face. That was truly magnificent, Naruto-kun. You have a real talent for theatrics. Naruto just held Rias, feeling the tension of the past few days finally drain away. He looked over her head and met the stunned gazes of the Grimoire family, Sirzex, and the other high-ranking devils. He had not just won a match. He had made a statement. Later that evening, after the humiliated Phoenix clan had departed and the guests had dispersed, the three of them sat in the quiet solitude of the garden where it had all begun. The twilight sky was peaceful. Rias was leaning against his side, her head on his shoulder, utterly content. Akeno sat opposite them, sipping tea, her violet eyes twinkling in the soft light. They're all talking about you, Rias murmured. My father, my brother, everyone. They want to know who you are, where your power comes from. Let them talk, Naruto said softly. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that you're free. Rias lifted her head, her eyes locking with his. The gratitude, the admiration, the years of deep, unspoken affection, all culminated in that single look. She leaned in and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to his lips. It was a kiss of promises, of a future she could now choose for herself. When she pulled back, Akeno was smiling knowingly. Well, it's about time. She leaned forward and, to Naruto's surprise, placed a gentle kiss on his other cheek. Thank you, Naruto-kun. You saved more than just her future today. Naruto looked between the two most important women in his new life. The crimson-haired devil princess and the raven-haired priestess of thunder. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known since before the fourth great ninja war. He had lost one family but had found another. And this time, he was strong enough to protect them from the very beginning. He smiled, a true, genuine smile that reached his ancient eyes. This is just the beginning, he said, looking out at the endless, starry sky of the underworld. He knew his victory today was a stone tossed into a vast lake. And the ripples would be felt far and wide. New enemies would come, drawn by the whispers of his power. The world was far larger and more complicated than one arrogant devil clan. But for tonight, under the twilight sky, surrounded by his precious people, he was home. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A Queen's Gambit and a Stray's Plea. The victory was a strange, quiet thing. There were no grand parades. No triumphant feasts. Instead, a palpable sense of relief settled over the Gremory estate, as tangible as the ever-present twilight. The oppressive weight of the Phoenix engagement had been lifted. And in its place, a new, uncertain future bloomed. The whispers in the halls of the underworld had changed. Naruto Uzumaki was no longer the Gremory's strange ward, he was their champion. A monstrously powerful and unknown variable who had dismantled a pillar house's pride without a scratch. 3 days after the raiding game, Naruto sat on the edge of a large, Rnate fountain in the central Gremory garden, watching Rias and Akeno practice their magic. Rias sent a sphere of pure destructive energy into a training barrier, the contained explosion rattling the very air. Akeno answered with a bolt of golden lightning, a crackling spear of holy power that sizzled with barely restrained force. They moved with a newfound confidence, a freedom that hadn't been there before. You're over-condensing your power, Rias, Naruto called out, his tone conversational. You're trying to force it into a smaller shape, but you're just wasting energy containing it. Let it be larger, less dense. Aim for efficiency, not just a smaller boom. Rias paused, breathing heavily, and shot him a mock glare. It's easy for you to say. You just think, and things happen. Everything is about control, he replied with a small smile. Whether it's a whisper or a roar, the voice is the same. You just have to learn how to speak with it. Akeno giggled, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. Such a wise teacher. Maybe you should open your own school, Naruto-kun. I'm sure you'd have many eager female students. The playful jab was familiar, comfortable. The tension that had once simmered under their interactions was gone, replaced by a deep and abiding ease. He was no longer just their friend or protector, he was the architect of their freedom. The kiss Rias had given him after the battle had been a silent acknowledgement of that, a seal on a bond that had been forged over years of shared history. Their practice was interrupted by the arrival of a regal figure, his long, crimson hair even more vibrant than his sister's. Sears's Lucifer walked toward them, Graphia a silent, dutiful shadow at his side. He wasn't wearing his formal robes of a Satan, but a more casual, modern suit that did little to diminish his overwhelming aura. I hope I'm not interrupting, Sears said, his smile warm, but his eyes holding a keen, analytical light as they fell on Naruto. Brother, Rias beamed, her fatigue forgotten as she ran to hug him. What are you doing here? Official business, I'm afraid. And a personal thank you, he said, ruffling her hair. He then turned his full attention to Naruto. The casual atmosphere of the garden suddenly felt charged, as if a switch had been flipped. The air thickened with the raw power of a Satan. Naruto Uzumaki, the underworld owes you its gratitude. You have, in one swift move, averted a political crisis and put an arrogant fool in his place. Naruto simply inclined his head. I did it for Rias. I know, Sears said, and his respect seemed genuine. The Phoenix clan has formally withdrawn their proposal. They cited irreconcilable differences. The truth is, you terrified them. Lord Phoenix is more afraid of UT. Han he is of the political fallout from a broken contract. You didn't just defeat Riser, you dismantled the very foundation of his power and pride. He will not be a problem again. He paused, his expression turning more serious. This brings us to the future. Rias is now unbound by any engagement. However, the elders will not rest. They will simply seek another suitor. Unless, of course, the position is already filled. His meaning was crystal clear. Rias's cheeks flushed a deep crimson, and Akeno watched with an amused sparkle in her eyes. Naruto met the Satan's gaze without flinching. He understood the political game. His victory had created a power vacuum around Rias. To protect her, it needed to be filled, and filled by him. I understand. Good. Searsex nodded, seemingly satisfied with the simple answer. For now, your de facto status as her fiancé will be recognized. No one in their right mind would challenge you for her hand after that display. It gives us time. It gives her time. He looked at his sister with genuine affection. That is the greatest gift you could have given her. After Searsex and Graphia departed, the three of them were left in the charged silence. Fiancé. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Rias was the first to speak, her voice soft. You don't have to, you know. I mean, you did all of this for me. I don't expect you to be tied down by our politics. Naruto turned to her, his expression softening. He reached out and tucked a strand of her crimson hair behind her ear. Rias, when did this become about politics for me? I told you, this is personal. It always has been. Before she could respond, Akeno stepped forward, her smile a little more complex than usual. He's right, you know, President. This was never about politics for him. Naruto-kun has always only ever moved for the sake of the people he cares for. It's one of his most troublesome, and most endearing, qualities. She looked at Naruto, and for a fleeting second, he saw a flash of her own painful history in her eyes, the burden of her mixed heritage, the loneliness of being feared. She saw a kindred spirit in him, someone who understood what it meant to carry a power that set you apart. The tender moment was broken by a quiet, hesitant voice. President. They turned to see Kaneko Tuju, Rias's small, white-haired rook, standing at the edge of the garden. Her usual stoic, deadpan expression was gone, replaced by a visible and jarring anxiety. Her hands were clenched into tiny fists at her sides. Kaneko, what's wrong? Rias asked immediately, her concern for her peerage member overriding everything else. Kaneko walked forward, her golden eyes fixed on the stone path. She looked small and incredibly vulnerable. I received a message. From my sister. The name went unsaid, but Akeno and Rias both stiffened. Kuroka. The name was infamous. An SS-class stray devil, one of the most powerful and dangerous criminals in the underworld, wanted for the heinous crime of killing her master. And she was Kaneko's older sister, a source of deep shame and pain for the young rook. What did she want? Rias asked gently, placing a comforting hand on Kaneko's shoulder. Kaneko flinched slightly at the topic, but she didn't pull away. She finally looked up, her gaze shifting between the three of them before landing, surprisingly, on Naruto. She said she's in trouble. She said she was framed. A heavy silence fell over the garden. The idea was preposterous. The evidence against Kuroka had been overwhelming. To question it was to question the entire justice system of the devils. Framed. Akeno breathed, her expression unreadable. For what purpose? She didn't say in the message, Kaneko mumbled, her voice trembling. She said she's being hunted. Not just by devils. By something else. Something old. She wants to meet. She wants to explain. She asked for him. Her small hand lifted, a single finger pointing shakily at Naruto. Naruto's eyebrows rose slightly. Me. She doesn't know me. She knows what you did, Kaneko said, her voice barely a whisper. The story of the man who beat an entire peerage by himself is already spreading. She said she needs someone powerful enough to be heard, and reckless enough to listen. She wants to meet, but only if you are there. The request was a live grenade tossed into their newfound peace. This was not a political squabble with an arrogant house. This was aiding and abetting a notorious fugitive. The consequences would be catastrophic. Kaneko, you know we can't, Rias said, her voice filled with anguish. Harboring a stray of her class, my family, my peerage, we would all be branded as traitors. It could start a civil war. But what if she's telling the truth? Kaneko pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. A shocking sight from the stoic girl. She's my sister. I know what she did was wrong, but what if there's more to it? She sounded scared. I've never heard her sound scared before. Rias was torn, her loyalty to her friend clashing with her duty to her clan. Akeno was silent, her own past as the daughter of a fallen angel leader giving her a clear sympathy for Kuroka's position as an outcast. They were caught in an impossible dilemma. Naruto had remained silent through the exchange, listening, observing. He watched the tears trace paths down Kaneko's cheeks. He saw genuine conflict warring in Rias's soul. He had seen this before, in a different world. Good people trapped by laws and systems that were too rigid to account for the truth. He had fought a war to break a cycle of hatred. He would not stand by and watch his family be tormented by a cycle of bureaucracy. He stepped forward, his presence instantly calming the turbulent emotions. Where and when? He asked. The question was so simple, so direct, that it cut through all the debate. Rias and Kaneko stared at him in stunned silence. Naruto, you can't be serious, Rias said, aghast. The risk is too great. What risk? He countered, his voice level and firm. The risk that the elders will be displeased. That we might lose political favor. I faced down your entire political system 3 days ago to stop you from being forced into a miserable marriage. Kaneko is a member of your family. Your peerage. Her pain is your pain. And you never, ever turn your back on family. The politics can go to hell. His words struck a chord. A fundamental truth that resonated deeper than any law. Rias looked at Kaneko's tear-streaked face, and her resolve crumbled. He was right. Since when had she priori? 'Tis the opinions of old men in council chambers over the well-being of the people she loved. Naruto's clarity was a cleansing fire, burning away the doubt. She took a deep breath and gave him a determined nod. You're right, we'll hear what she has to say. Kaneko let out a choked sob of relief, wiping her eyes. Thank you, President, thank you, Naruto-senpai. She relayed the details. An abandoned church on the outskirts of Kuo town, in the human world. Midnight. The location was a deliberate choice. A holy place was painful for devils to enter, providing a natural deterrent for any low-level pursuers. The air inside the dilapidated church was thick with the smell of dust and decay. Moonlight streamed through a shattered stained glass window, illuminating dancing motes of dust in the cavernous space. The holy aura of the place was a dull, irritating throb at the back of their demonic senses, like a low-grade headache. Rias, Akeno, and Kaneko stood in a tight-knit group, their expressions tense. Naruto stood slightly apart from them, his senses extended, feeling the world around him. He felt the rustle of a mouse in the walls, the flutter of a bat in the belfry. He felt the subtle shift in the air that heralded a new arrival. Well, what have we here? A sultry, playful voice echoed from the shadowed rafters above. A little kitten, the Grimoire princess, a fallen angel's daughter, and a big, powerful fox. I knew you'd come, Nya. A figure dropped from the ceiling, landing with impossible grace and silence on the altar. She was a stunning woman with long black hair and feline golden eyes. Dressed in a revealing kimono that did little to hide her voluptuous figure. 2 black cat ears twitched atop her head, and twin tails swished lazily behind her. Kuroka, the Nekosho, radiated an aura of raw power that was a potent cocktail of demonic energy and something else, something more primal and natural. Senjutsu. Her lazy, seductive gaze swept over them before locking onto Naruto. Her eyes widened slightly, a genuine curiosity replacing her playful smirk. She could sense his power, but it was like looking into the sun, vast, formless, and impossible to gauge the depths of. So you're the one who spanked the little fire chicken, she purred, sauntering toward him, her hips swaying with a mesmerizing rhythm. I have to say, I'm impressed. It's not every day you find a male with a real backbone. She stopped directly in front of him, so close he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. She reached up, tracing a finger along his jawline. I do love strong men. We could make such powerful children together, you and I. Naruto didn't react to the blatant seduction, his expression remaining calm. You asked for a meeting to talk. So talk. Kuroka pouted, her ears flattening slightly. All business, aren't we? No fun at all. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. But maybe you're right to be cautious. In a flash, her hand lashed out, her fingernails elongating into sharp claws aimed directly at his eyes. The attack was blindingly fast, a blur of motion that would have eviscerated any normal devil. Naruto didn't move a muscle. He simply raised his own hand, catching her wrist in an iron grip. Her claws stopped a mere inch from his face. The air crackled with the force of the stopped blow, but he hadn't even shifted his feet. Kuroka's eyes widened in genuine shock. She had put a significant amount of her Jujutsu-enhanced strength into that strike. For him to stop it so effortlessly, so calmly. He met her stunned gaze, and for the first time, she saw it, the sheer, terrifying depth in his eyes. It was the look of a being who had seen the rise and fall of worlds, who had fought gods and demons from a time long forgotten. It was ancient, unshakable, and utterly absolute. He released her wrist as gently as he had caught it. "Are you done?" he asked, his voice still level. Kuroka took a step back, her playful demeanor completely gone. She was looking at him now not as a potential mate or a political tool, but as a force of nature she had foolishly tried to test. She swallowed hard, her feline instinct screaming at her that she was in the presence of a predator far beyond her comprehension. She took a deep, steadying breath, her expression turning deadly serious. "All right," she said, her voice low and tense. "You've proven your point. Now you need to listen. The story they told you about me killing my master, it's a lie." She looked past him, at her little sister, at Rias, and then back to him. A flicker of genuine fear. The same fear Kaneko had heard in her message, surfaced in her golden eyes. "The ones who framed me, Nya," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that chilled the dusty air. "They're still hunting me, and they aren't devils. They're something else entirely, something that smells of forgotten graves and the cold between the stars." Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Whispers of Primordial Night. The air in the church, already heavy with dust and neglect, grew thick with a tension that had nothing to do with the lingering holy aura. Kuroka's playful facade had evaporated, leaving behind a raw, hunted desperation that was far more compelling than any of her seductive posturing. Her golden eyes, wide with a fear that was clearly not an act, were locked on Naruto. Rias took an instinctive step forward, her expression a mixture of disbelief and ingrained skepticism. "That's a serious accusation, Kuroka." The council presented evidence. "Witnesses from your master's own household." Kuroka let out a short, bitter laugh, a sound devoid of any humor. "Witnesses? You mean the other members of his little cult? Of course they testified against me. I was the loose end, the one who saw too much, Nya." She began to pace before the altar, her twin tails lashing behind her like agitated snakes. "My master, Lord Valerius, he wasn't just some high-ranking devil looking to advance his station. He was obsessed. He believed the current power structure, the Satans, the whole system, was a fragile imitation of true power. He and his followers were digging into things they shouldn't have, rituals and texts that predated the Great War." Naruto's gaze sharpened. He had seen this kind of obsession before. Orochimaru's quest for immortality, Kabuto's desire to surpass his master, it was a familiar, destructive path. "What kind of power?" he asked, his voice cutting through the rising tension. Kuroka stopped pacing and looked at him, gratitude in her eyes for the direct question. "Something old, something that wasn't demonic or holy. An energy source he called the Primordial Night. He believed it was the original state of the universe, a sea of potential from which all things were born and to which all things must return. He wasn't trying to summon a god, he was trying to tap the wellspring of creation itself." Akeno's breath hitched. "That sounds like a variation of the creation myths. The primordial chaos. It's a concept most factions consider heretical, a power too fundamental and dangerous to meddle with." "He succeeded," Kuroka whispered, and a shiver traced its way down her spine. "At least partially. He created things, beings made of living shadow and cold. They weren't strong at first, more like echoes, but they were wrong. They felt empty. My senj, UTSU could feel it. They had no life force. They were just holes in the world." She turned her gaze to her sister, her expression softening with a profound sadness. "He wanted to perfect the process. He needed a catalyst, A powerful life force with a natural connection to the world's energy to stabilize his creations. He needed a senjutsu user. He chose Sharon. Kaneko flinched as if struck, her small body trembling. He was going to sacrifice her, Kuroka said, her voice dropping to a venomous snarl. Use her as a battery to give his shadow things a foothold in reality. I found his notes. I saw the ritual circle prepared in his laboratory. I confronted him. He admitted it. He said it was for a greater purpose. So I killed him. I tore him and his guards apart before they could lay a hand on her. She took a shaky breath. The memory clearly painful. I tried to take Sharon with me, but she was scared. She saw what I did, the blood, and she ran. The rest of his followers found the scene, raised the alarm, and twisted the story. The power-hungry stray who murdered her benevolent master. It was the perfect cover story for them. It got rid of me and hid their forbidden research in one fell swoop. The story settled over them, chilling and horribly plausible. It explained everything. Her flight, her desperation, the specific and strange nature of the hunters she described. If this is true, you need proof, Rias said, her mind already working through the political implications. An accusation of heresy against a devil lord, even a dead one, was a serious matter. Notes, artifacts, anything. I know where his main laboratory is, Kuroka nodded. A hidden fortress in the Forka's territory, a desolate mountain range no one ever goes to. It's magically shielded. I can get you through the outer wards. But I've never been able to get inside the laboratory itself. It's sealed with his blood and the energy of whatever he was meddling with. Naruto looked at Rias. Her face was a storm of conflict. This was a path from which there was no easy return. If Kuroka was lying, they were traitors. If she was telling the truth, they were stepping into a conspiracy that could shake the foundations of the underworld. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her. We are not the Devil Council, Rias, he said softly. We don't need irrefutable proof to investigate the truth. We just need a reason to believe. Kaneko's sister is asking for our help. For me, that's reason enough. His simple, unwavering conviction was the anchor she needed. She looked at Kaneko's hopeful, tear-filled eyes. Then at Akeno's sympathetic nod. Her duty was not to the council or to politics. It was to her family, her peerage. And Naruto. She straightened her shoulders, the Grimoire heiress taking charge once more. All right, she said, her voice firm. Kuroka, you'll take us there. We'll find your proof, and then we will clear your name. Kuroka stared at her, then at Naruto, and for the first time, a genuine, unforced smile touched her lips. It transformed her face, washing away the fear and the seductive mask, revealing a flicker of the older sister she must have once been. Thank you, Nya, she whispered. You won't regret this. The Forka's mountain range was a jagged scar across the underworld's landscape. Towers of black, volcanic rock clawed at the purple-tinged sky, and a perpetual, chilling wind howled through the barren passes. It was a place of profound isolation, the perfect location for secrets. Kuroka led them through a maze of canyons, her movements fluid and certain. She pointed to a sheer cliff face, indistinguishable from any other. It's in there. The entrance is shielded by a perception filter and a multi-layered barrier keyed to reject any unauthorized demonic energy. How do you propose we get in? Akeno asked, eyeing the solid rock warily. The rejection ward is the main problem, Kuroka explained. But it's designed to stop devil magic. My senjutsu is different, and I can probably weaken a spot enough to slip through. And you, she said, her golden eyes landing on Naruto, your energy feels like, well, like nothing else I've ever felt. It might not even register as a threat to the wards. Naruto stepped forward, placing a hand on the cold rock. He closed his eyes, extending his senses. He could feel the barrier, a complex weave of demonic energy, formulas. And something else, that cold, empty static Kuroka had described. It was like a film of oil on the water of reality. He didn't need to break it. He just needed to step through the gap. Everyone, place a hand on me. He instructed. Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, and a hesitant Kuroka did as he said. Naruto focused, gathering his unique chakra around them. He didn't force his way through the barrier. Instead, he made them of the barrier, momentarily attuning their energy signatures to match the cold, empty frequency of the outer ward. For a split second, they simply ceased to be an obstacle. He took a step forward, and they passed through the solid rock as if it were a mist, emerging into a vast, dark cavern on the other side. The others stumbled, gasping from the disorienting sensation. Kuroka stared at him, her mouth agape. How did you do that? I've been trying to get through that ward for years. I didn't fight it, Naruto said simply, his eyes already scanning the darkness. I listened to it, and then I agreed with it. The cavern was the antechamber to the real laboratory. A massive, circular door of obsidian-like material stood before them, covered in pulsing, sickly purple runes that seemed to writhe like living things. The cold, empty feeling was stronger here, a palpable pressure that made the hair on their arms stand up. This is the final seal, Kuroka breathed, her hand going to her side. It's keyed to his bloodline. Then we open it the old-fashioned way, Rias said, stepping forward. A sphere of destructive energy, far more potent and LED than her practice shots in the garden, formed in her hand. Stand back. She unleashed the blast. The sphere slammed into the door, and for a moment, the cavern was filled with a deafening roar. The power of destruction tried to unmake the seal. But the purple runes flared, and the cold energy met the Grimoire power, not countering it, but consuming it. The destructive sphere dwindled, eaten away by the oppressive emptiness, until it vanished with a pathetic hiss. Rias stared, shocked. It absorbed it. Before they could devise another plan, the runes on the door flared violently. An alarm. They know we're here, Akeno said, her hands already crackling with holy lightning. From the shadows of the cavern, they emerged. Figures that seemed to be woven from darkness itself, their forms vaguely humanoid but lacking any distinct features. They were silhouettes in the dim light, armed with blades of solidified shadow, and they moved with an eerie, unnatural silence. There were at least a dozen of them. These are the things I told you about, Kuroka yelled, her battle instincts taking over as she crouched, senjutsu flaring around her. Kaneko, with me, Rias commanded, her own battle aura surging. Akeno took to the air, her fallen angel wings spreading as lightning danced between her fingers. The shadow beings attacked. They didn't roar or scream, the only sound was the illing whisper of their shadow blades cutting through the air. Rias launched another blast of destruction. One of the creatures raised its blade, and the shadow simply swallowed the attack. Akeno's holy lightning, however, had a much different effect. A bolt slammed into one of the beings, and it shrieked, a high, thin sound like tearing fabric, as its form sizzled and dissolved where the light touched it. They're weak to holy power, Akeno called out. Noted, Kuroka yelled as she blurred into motion, her movements enhanced by senjutsu. She was a whirlwind of claws and kicks, but while she was faster than the creatures, her physical blows seemed to pass through their shadowy forms with minimal effect, like punching smoke. One of them swung its blade, and she was forced to disengage, a thin cut bleeding on her arm. Where the shadow blade had touched her, the wound felt unnaturally cold, and her demonic energy felt sluggish. Naruto observed for a fraction of a second, analyzing the enemy. They were constructs, empty shells animated by a negative, consuming energy. Demonic power was fuel to them, physical attacks were ineffective, and holy power was their antithesis. Simple enough, but there were too many for Akeno to handle alone. He needed to even the odds. He moved, a blur of motion that made Kuroka's speed look sluggish. He appeared beside Kaneko, who was about to be overwhelmed by two of the shadow beings. He didn't form a Rasengan. He simply held out his palm. A small, sun-bright sphere of pure, golden energy bloomed in his hand. It wasn't chakra from the nine tails. It was the other half of his power. The sage energy, the life force of the planet itself, gathered and condensed. He thrust his palm forward. The golden sphere didn't explode. It pulsed, releasing a wave of pure, positive life energy. The two shadow creatures dissolved instantly, their forms unable to exist in the face of such potent vitality. He then created two clones, who instantly went to support Rias and Kuroka. Their own hands glowing with the same golden sage energy, acting as shields that disintegrated the shadow blades on contact. They're made of negative energy, Naruto called out, his voice cutting through the sounds of battle. Don't feed them with your demonic power. Akeno, keep up the pressure. Rias, Kuroka, defensive patterns. Let them come to you and support Akeno from a distance. His tactical commands were instantaneous and perfect. The tide of the battle shifted immediately. With Naruto and his clones neutralizing the creatures' primary mode of attack and Akeno acting as their main artillery. The tide turned from a desperate defense into a systematic extermination. In minutes, the last of the shadow creatures dissolved into nothing. They stood panting in the silent cavern, the adrenaline slowly receding. Kuroka stared at Naruto's hand, which was still faintly glowing with the golden light. What was that? The opposite of whatever they are, he said, letting the energy fade. The massive obsidian door behind them began to grind open, the runes fading now that the guardians had been destroyed. The path to the laboratory was clear. Steeling themselves, they walked inside. The lab was a scene from a nightmare. Cages lined one wall, most empty, but one contained the desiccated husk of some unfortunate creature. Tables were covered in strange alchemy. Cal equipment and notebooks filled with frantic, insane scrawling. And in the center of the room was a large, blackened circle of runes. The air was thick with the energy of 1,000 failed rituals. The notes, Rias said. Heading for a desk, she picked up a leather-bound journal. The last few entries were barely legible, the script of a man losing his mind. The whispers are louder now. They speak of the first shadow. The true master of the void, Erebus. He promises the end of this flawed world, a return to the glorious, silent dark. The children of Lucifer are pale, fleeting things, only the primordial night is eternal. Erebus, Akeno murmured, reading over Rias's shoulder. I've never heard that name in any of the devil or angel mythologies. It's from an old human pantheon, Naruto said, his voice grim. He was examining the central circle. Greek. Erebus was a primordial deity, the personification of darkness. Suddenly, the runes in the circle flared with a blinding, purple light. A figure began to coalesce in the center of the circle, not a shadowy minion, but a solid, handsome man in elegant, dark robes. He had silver hair and eyes that glowed with a soft, violet light. He carried an air of immense, ancient authority, and his smile was one of condescending amusement. Well now, the man said, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone that echoed in their minds more than their ears. It seems some of the local fauna have stumbled into the nursery. I must commend you. It has been a very long time since anyone has managed to disperse my hounds of shadow. His gaze swept over them, dismissing Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka as little more than insects. Then his eyes fell on Naruto. The amused smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He tilted his head, intrigued. Ah, there is an echo in you, the herald said. His violet eyes narrowing. Something that does not belong to this fragile little world. An echo of an older, more violent reality. How fascinating. Who are you? Naruto demanded, stepping in front of the others. I am merely a herald, the man replied with a slight bow. A voice for the one who is to come. My master, the Lord Erebus, is stirring from his long slumber. He grows weary of this aberration. This world of fleeting lights and loud, squabbling children who call themselves gods and devils. He intends to correct it, to return all things to the beautiful, perfect silence of the dark from whence they came. He raised a hand, and a tendril of pure, solid darkness, far more potent than the creatures, blades, lashed out. Naruto met it with a shield of sage energy. The two forces collided, and the entire laboratory groaned under the strain. The herald seemed surprised by the resistance. You are strong, little echo, he mused. Perhaps you may even be worthy of an invitation to serve. The rest of you, however, he flicked his wrist, and the tendril of darkness split, bypassing Naruto and shooting toward Rias and the others. Naruto moved in a flash, appearing before them and creating a massive dome of golden energy that enveloped them all. The darkness slammed against it, cracking and splintering the shield, but it held. The herald chuckled. Impressive. But you are only delaying the inevitable. The age of light is ending. The primordial night is rising. With that, his form dissolved back into the purple light of the circle, which then faded, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and ancient dust. They were left in the ringing silence of the laboratory, the dead herald's words hanging in the air. They had found the proof Kuroka needed. But in doing so, they had stumbled upon a threat that made underworld politics seem like a childish game. A primordial god was waking up, and he had just declared war on their entire world. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Treaty of Three Factions and a Shadow War. The journey back from the Forcas Mountains was a somber, silent affair. The proof they had found. Lord Valerius's journal fee. D with his descent into madness and the worship of a primordial entity named Erebus, felt heavier than any stone. It was not just an exoneration for Kuroka, it was a declaration of a war they were not prepared for. Against an enemy that existed outside their known reality. They didn't return to the Grimoire estate. Instead, Naruto made a single, encrypted magical call. Within the hour, they were met. In a pocket dimension of shimmering silver light by Sears's Lucifer himself. Graphia stood at his side, her expression impassive, but her eyes held a flicker of deep concern as she took in the weary state of her brother's family. Sears's listened without interruption, his warm smile fading into a mask of grim focus as Rias and Kuroka recounted their story, presenting the journal as evidence. He read the final, frantic entries, his aura growing so heavy and cold that the very light of the dimension seemed to dim. Erebus, he murmured, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. There are legends, apocryphal texts that the first Satans suppressed. Tales of the primordial pantheon, the powers that existed before light and dark were given names. They were considered cautionary tales, myths to frighten young devils. To think one of them was real. He closed the journal, his gaze falling on Kuroka. All the power of a Satan was focused on her, an immense pressure that would have brought a lesser devil to their knees. You have been wronged, Kuroka. And you have brought a warning of incalculable importance to our attention. On my authority as Lucifer, I grant you a full and immediate pardon. You are no longer astray. Kuroka, who had faced down shadow monsters and the disapproval of the entire underworld with a defiant smirk, looked utterly stunned. Her cat ears flattened against her hair, and her twin tails froze mid-swish. A single tear escaped her eye before she hastily wiped it away. She bowed her head, a gesture of genuine, unforced respect. Thank you, Lord Lucifer. Sears's then turned to Naruto, and the look in his eyes was one of profound gravity. You have once again placed yourself at the center of a storm to protect my sister, Naruto. But this is bigger than a squabble between houses. A threat of this magnitude, it could annihilate us all. The angels, the fallen, the devils. All of our conflicts will mean nothing if the world is plunged back into primordial darkness. He paced for a moment, the fate of worlds resting on his shoulders. I was already scheduled to attend a summit with the leaders of the other factions. A peace treaty, long overdue, is finally on the table. This changes the agenda. I can no longer go simply as a diplomat. He stopped and looked at them, his decision made. I want you all to come with me. Rias, as the future of the Grimoire clan. And Naruto, I want the leaders of Heaven and the Grigori to see you. I want them to understand the new players on the board. We will need allies. We will need to be united. It was not a request. The location of the summit was a testament to the fragile trust being built. A neutral pocket dimension designed to resemble the ancient city of Babylon, a sprawling metropolis of ziggurats and hanging gardens under an artificial sun. The air was warm and filled with the scent of exotic flowers and the sound of flowing water. It was a carefully constructed paradise meant to soothe ancient animosities. Naruto stood on a balcony overlooking the central plaza, flanked by Rias, Akeno, and a newly pardoned Kuroka, who looked slightly out of place in a more formal, though still alluring, dark purple kimono. Kaneko was there too, standing close to her sister, their past pain now overshadowed by a quiet, healing reunion. They were part of Sears's official entourage, a clear statement to all who saw them. I never thought I'd see the day, Akeno murmured, her gaze distant as she watched a contingent of angels with brilliant white wings walk past a group of fallen angels with wings of black feathers. Angels and fallen, sharing the same space without trying to kill each other. Peace makes for strange bedfellows, Kuroka purred, though her eyes were sharp, scanning the crowd with the ingrained caution of a fugitive. But it's usually when everyone is in the same bed that the daggers come out, NYA. Naruto's senses were on high alert. The sheer concentration of power in this place was staggering. He could feel the serene, holy light of the Archangel Michael, a presence like a calm, warm sun. He could feel the inquisitive, slightly erratic energy of Azazel, the governor of the fallen angels. A presence like a storm of intellectual curiosity and barely leashed power. and dwarfing them all was the immense, controlled abyss of Sirzex's own power. But beneath it all, he felt a subtle wrongness. A faint, almost undetectable hum in the air that didn't belong, like a single sour note in a grand symphony. Their musings were interrupted by the approach of Azazel himself. The governor of the Grigori looked more like a rock star than a faction leader, dressed in a casual black coat over a red shirt, his long black hair shot with streaks of blonde. He had a dozen black wings, but they were folded away, giving him a deceptively relaxed appearance. His eyes, however, were sharp and missed nothing. Well, if it isn't Sirzex's little sister and her entourage, Azazel said with a wide, knowing grin. He ignored Rias completely, his attention zeroing in on Naruto. So you're the one. The boy who broke Raiser necks without breaking a sweat. I've been dying to meet you. The energy signature from that fight was all over the place. Didn't fit any known classification. My researchers are still scratching their heads. He circled Naruto, his gaze shamelessly analytical. And you're the source. What are you? You feel quiet, too quiet, like a volcano pretending to be a hill. Naruto met his stare calmly. Just a guardian. Azazel laughed, a genuine, booming sound. A guardian. I love it. Humble, yet it says everything. I'm Azazel. I collect interesting things, and you, my friend, are very, very interesting. His gaze flickered to Akeno. And you've brought Barakiel's girl with you. She has her mother's eyes. Akeno stiffened, her smile becoming a brittle mask. Azazel's comment, though not malicious, had struck a nerve. Naruto subtly shifted his position, a silent, protective gesture that put him slightly between Akeno and the fallen angel leader. Azazel noticed the movement and his grin widened. Protective, too. I like you already. The formal conference began in a grand hall at the top of the central ziggurat. Sirzex, Michael, and Azazel sat at a large, circular table, their key aides standing behind them. Naruto and Rias's group were given seats of honor to the side. A position that allowed them to observe everything. The initial talks were tense but productive. Sirzex laid out the thread of Erebus, his words casting a pall over the assembly. The Archangel Michael, a beautiful, androgynous being with 12 golden wings and an aura of absolute peace, listened with serene gravity. This is a grave portent, Michael said, his voice like the chiming of 1,000 tiny bells. The tales of the primordials were thought to be allegorical. If one of them truly stirs, then our own conflicts are but the squabbles of children before a tidal wave. Azazel, for all his bravado, leaned forward, his expression serious for the first time. A being that consumes magic and is antithetical to life itself, our conventional weapons would be useless. We need a new strategy. We need to know what we're facing. It was in that moment of tense, unified focus that the sour note Naruto had felt in the air became a piercing shriek. A high-frequency wave, imperceptible to most, washed through the hall, and all at once, the power went out. It wasn't a loss of light, but a loss of self. Naruto felt the demonic and holy energy in the room, the brilliant auras of Sirzex, Michael, and Azazel, suddenly sputter and die, like snuffing 1,000 candles at once. Rias gasped, clutching her chest. Akeno's hands, which had begun to crackle with lightning, went dead. The wings on the angels and fallen angels flickered and vanished, and a collective cry of shock and disbelief filled the hall as the most powerful beings in the world were suddenly, terrifyingly, rendered impotent. Naruto felt the disruption, but his own core energy, the chakra of his old life, the senjutsu of the world itself, remained untouched. The wave had been designed to disrupt manifested supernatural energy. The specific frequency used by devils, angels, and fallen. His was something else entirely. What is this? Sirzex roared, rising from his chair. For the first time, Naruto saw a flicker of real alarm on the Satan's face. He was still physically powerful, but his vast reserves of demonic power were locked away, inaccessible. Crash! The great stained glass windows of the hall shattered inwards. And figures in sleek, black body armor rappelled into the room, smoke grenades instantly filling the air. They moved with silent, professional lethality, their helmets hiding their faces. Their movements precise and coordinated. They were human. On their shoulders was an insignia, a broken halo pierced by a silver sword. Anti-Deity Task Force, Aegis. One of the soldiers shouted, his voice distorted by his helmet. All targets are neutralized. Secure the faction leaders. They carried weapons that hummed with a strange, blue light. One of them fired at an Archangel guard, and a net of crackling energy enveloped the angel, who collapsed to the ground, spasming. Chaos erupted. The assembled guards, stripped of their powers, were just individuals in a room. The Aegis soldiers were a trained, equipped fighting force, but they hadn't counted on Naruto. While everyone else was still reeling from the shock, Naruto was already moving. His mind, honed by years of war, processed the situation in a heartbeat. Enemy. Human, well-trained. Weaponry. Technological, designed against supernatural targets. Our side. Powers nullified. My side. Unaffected. Objective. Protect the leaders. Rias, Akeno, Kuroka. Kaneko. Defensive circle around the table. Now, he commanded, his voice cutting through the panic with absolute authority. They didn't hesitate. Shaken but resolute, they formed a protective line around the three stunned leaders. Naruto blurred into motion. He was a shadow, a ghost. An Aegis soldier turned to aim at Searsex, and Naruto was suddenly there. A single, precise chop to the back of the neck, and the soldier crumpled. Naruto caught the strange rifle before it hit the floor, his mind already analyzing its weight and design. 2 clones, now, he muttered to himself. 2 perfect copies of him flickered into existence beside him, a feat of pure chakra control that left Azazel, even in his powerless state, staring with wide-eyed wonder. You 3, protect them. Naruto ordered his clones, jerking a thumb at his friends. No one gets through. The clones nodded and took up positions, their hands already glowing with the golden light of sage energy. The sight of it made the Aegis soldiers pause for a fraction of a second, their tech unable to classify the energy signature. That hesitation was all Naruto needed. He flowed through the room like a phantom. He was not a god or a devil relying on overwhelming power. He was a shinobi. He used the smoke for cover, the panicked crowd for distraction. An elbow strike here, a disabling leg sweep there. He moved from target to target, a whirlwind of silent, efficient taijutsu. The Aegis soldiers, so effective against the supernatural guards, were like children against a true master of hand-to-hand combat. Suddenly, a massive hologram flickered to life in the center of the room, projecting the image of a man in a stark white uniform. He was handsome, with silver hair cut in a severe military style and cold, intelligent blue eyes. He looked down at the chaos in the hall with an expression of detached satisfaction. Searsex Lucifer, Michael the Archangel, Azazel of the Grigori, the man said, his voice calm and resonant. Broadcast throughout the hall. My name is Director Castiel Vance, of the Aegis Initiative. For too long, humanity has lived as a footnote in your ancient war. Cattle to be harvested for your peerages, souls to be fought over. We have been your victims, your pawns, and your worshippers. No more. His gaze swept the room, landing on the image of Naruto effort. Leslie dispatching another one of his elite soldiers. His calm expression tightened for a barest moment. Today is a demonstration, Vance continued, his voice hardening. We can touch you. We can hurt you. We can strip you of the very power that makes you believe you are gods. This world belongs to humanity now. We are taking it back. This peace treaty is an act of aggression against our species. A cabal of monsters deciding our fate. It is null and void. Naruto dispatched the last of the soldiers in the hall and came to a stop in the center of the room, looking up at the hologram. The battle was over in less than 2 minutes. Vance's holographic eyes narrowed, focusing solely on Naruto. And you, the anomaly. You are not on our lists. Your power operates outside the known spectrums. This is an unexpected, but intriguing development. Consider this a formal introduction. With that, the hologram vanished. On the floor, one of the downed soldiers' comms crackled to life. All teams, objective achieved. Withdraw. Withdraw now. The soldiers, those still conscious, disengaged with practiced efficiency, deploying flashbangs to cover their retreat. Just as quickly as it began, it was over. The high-frequency hum ceased. And with a collective gasp, the supernatural beings in the room felt their power flood back into them. Searsex's demonic aura returned with a vengeance, a furious, crimson tide. Michael's golden light blazed, and Azazel's wings snapped back into existence. They were left in a hull of shattered glass, smoke, and the unconscious bodies of elite human soldiers. The chilling words of Director Vance echoing in the silence. They had gathered to face a primordial god from the dawn of time, only to be assaulted by the very people they had always considered beneath them. Sears X looked at the unconscious soldiers, then at Naruto, who stood calmly amidst the wreckage. The Satan's expression was a mixture of fury, humiliation, and a dawning, profound respect. "You saved us," Sears X stated, the words heavy with the admission of his own momentary helplessness. "All of us." Naruto simply shook his head. "I protected my friends." He looked toward Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka, who were now looking at him with an awe that transcended their already deep affection. In that moment of absolute chaos, when gods and devils were rendered helpless, he had been their unshakable shield. He had been their certainty in a world suddenly thrown into turmoil. Their bond, forged in friendship and gratitude, was now tempered in the fires of a shared, life-threatening battle, becoming something harder. Something unbreakable. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. A Sage's Heart, a Devil's Vow. The silence that followed the Aegis Initiative's retreat was more profound than any battle cry. It was a silence thick with humiliation, shock, and a terrifying, world-altering revelation. The great leaders of the three factions, beings who could level mountains and boil seas, had been rendered as helpless as children. And they had been saved by one man, an anomaly who operated by rules they were only now beginning to comprehend. Sears X, his crimson aura now a tightly controlled inferno of cold fury, stared at the unconscious Aegis soldiers being bound by his royal guards. Azazel was running a hand through his hair, his usual grin replaced by a look of manic, scientific curiosity. An energy nullification field keyed to specific supernatural signatures, the sheer genius and audacity of it. "They didn't try to overpower us. They just unplugged us." Michael's serene expression was tinged with a deep sorrow. "They have weaponized their disbelief. Their technology is fueled by a philosophy that sees our very existence as a threat to be excised. This is a holy war, but one where humanity has declared us the heathens." Quote, all three of them turned their gazes to Naruto, who was quietly checking on Akeno. She had instinctively tried to summon her lightning the moment her power was cut. And the backlash had left her shaken. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and a gentle, warm energy flowed into her, settling the tremor in her hands. She gave him a small, grateful smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You were unaffected," Sears X stated, the question implicit. Naruto met his gaze. "The energy they targeted is manifested power, drawn from your demonic or holy nature. Mine is different. It is a part of me, generated from my own physical and spiritual being. They tried to cut the power line to the city, but I'm a self-contained generator." Azazel let out a low whistle. "A self-contained generator. So the only way to stop you is to kill you." No wonder Vance was so intrigued. He sobered quickly. "Which means you're now their primary target. You're the one variable they can't account for." The weight of that statement settled on Rias, who stood beside Naruto, her hand tightly gripping his arm. The thought of him becoming the focus of this terrifyingly efficient human army sent a chill of fear through her that no demonic threat ever had. "We now face two wars," Michael said, his voice resonating with grim finality. "One against the coming night of a primordial god, and one against the dawning light of a humanity that has decided it no longer needs us. Our peace treaty is no longer a political option, it is a necessity for survival." The leaders departed for a closed-door strategy session, leaving Naruto and the others in a private chamber overlooking the now empty plaza. The artificial sun was beginning to set, casting long, dramatic shadows. For a long time, nobody spoke. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and a raw, unsettling vulnerability. Kuroka was the one who broke the silence, her voice stripped of its usual playful purr. "I've been on the run for years," she said, staring at her own hands. "I've fought devils, exorcists, monsters you wouldn't believe. I have never felt that helpless before. To have your power, the very core of who you are, just switched off." She looked up, her golden eyes locking onto Naruto. "They would have taken us, caged us, dissected us, but you didn't even flinch." "I was terrified," Akeno admitted, her voice barely a whisper. She was leaning against a pillar, her arms wrapped around herself. When my lightning vanished, it was like a part of my soul was scooped out. For a moment, I was just Shuri Himehima's daughter again, a frightened little girl watching my mother die because I couldn't protect her. The confession was a raw, bleeding wound, an exposer of the deep-seated trauma she always kept hidden behind her sadistic smiles. Rias said nothing, but Naruto could feel her trembling. He turned, placing his hands on her shoulders. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with the memory of her own powerlessness. She, Rias Grimori, heiress to the power of destruction, had been reduced to a bystander. He's right, you know, she finally whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Azazel, they'll come for you now. This Aegis, Erebus, all of it. You've painted a target on your back for our sake. Naruto looked at the three of them. He saw not the powerful devils and strays the world saw, but the women he had come to cherish. He saw Rias's fierce pride, now shaken by a fear she had never known. He saw Akeno's playful mask, now cracked to reveal the wounded soul beneath. He saw Kuroka's hardened cynicism, now replaced by grudging, terrified respect. In their fear, he found an unshakable resolve. He had built this family in a new world, and he would not let it be broken. He would not let them live in fear, not of ancient gods, and not of arrogant humans. But more than that, he realized in that moment that his feelings for them ran deeper than just friendship or protectiveness. He had died once already. He had lived a life defined by loneliness, fighting to be acknowledged. He would not spend his second life keeping the people he loved at arm's length. Look at me, he said, his voice soft but firm, drawing all their gazes. He took a deep breath, his heart steady, his purpose clear. The world is changing. The old rules don't apply anymore. We're facing threats that will require more than just power to defeat. They will require trust, unity, an unbreakable foundation. He looked at Rias first, his eyes gentle. Rias, I have watched you grow from a girl struggling under the weight of her family's name into a strong, compassionate leader. You fight for your friends, you cherish your family. Your heart is as fiery and brilliant as your hair. You see me not as a weapon or an anomaly, but as Naruto. You made me feel like I had a home when I was utterly lost. He then turned his gaze to Akeno. Akeno, you hide your pain behind a beautiful smile. But I see the strength it takes for you to wear it. You carry the burdens of two bloodlines, but you have a kindness that is all your own. You understand the loneliness that comes with being different. And you've never once judged me for the power I hold. You make me feel understood. Finally, he looked at Kuroka, who watched him with wide, uncertain eyes. Kuroka, you've shown the world a hardened shell because it has given you nothing but reasons to. But I see the fierce loyalty you have for your sister. I see a survivor who has been betrayed and hunted, who wants nothing more than a place to finally stop running. You challenge me, you keep me on my toes, and you remind me that trust has to be earned. You make me feel real. He took a step back so he could see all three of them. The setting sun cast a golden glow around him, and in his eyes, they saw an ancient soul making the most important decision of his second life. I am not asking to be your shield, he said, his voice resonating with a quiet, profound sincerity. I am asking to be your partner. I'm not asking you to stand behind me. I'm asking you to stand beside me. In this world, and in whatever comes next. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent room. Rias Grimori, Akeno Himehima, Kuroka Tuju. I am asking all three of you to marry me. Let us build a house so strong it can weather any storm. Let us build a family. The silence that followed was absolute. It was not a proposal born of politics or lust, but a vow. A strategic and emotional choice made in the face of an uncertain future. He was offering them a true union, a partnership of equals. Rias was the first to react. Tears streamed freely down her face, but her smile was radiant, a sunrise after a long night. She stepped forward and placed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. Yes, she breathed, the word full of love and relief and absolute certainty. Naruto, yes. Akeno let out a shaky laugh, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. Her teasing mask was completely gone, leaving only genuine, overwhelming emotion. Era, you certainly don't do things by halves, do you, Naruto-kun? She moved to his side, her touch on his arm gentle. To be asked for who I am, not for the blood I carry, how could I possibly say no? Yes, you foolish, wonderful man. Yes. Kuroka stood frozen for a long moment. Her expression unreadable. She had offered herself to him as a mate, a biological imperative. He was offering her a home, a name, a family. He was offering her everything she secretly craved but never believed she could have. Her tough exterior crumbled, and she looked at him with a raw vulnerability that no one had ever seen from her before. You would really put your name next to mine? She whispered, her voice thick. After everything I am, a stray, a killer. I see who you are now, Naruto said softly, his gaze unwavering. And I see who you can be. With us. She let out a choked sob and, in a move that shocked everyone, threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. Yes, she mumbled into his shirt. Damn it, yes, Nya. Naruto wrapped his arms around all three of them, pulling them into a group hug. Rias, Akeno, Kuroka, his fiancés, his family. For a long moment, they just stood there, a small island of certainty in a sea of chaos. The twin threats of Erebus and Aegis still loomed, vast and terrifying, but in that embrace, they had forged a shield of their own. News of the triple engagement spread through the summit like a wildfire. What could have been a political scandal was, in the wake of the Aegis attack, seen as something else entirely, a masterstroke. X found Naruto on the balcony again, looking out at the artificial stars. The Satan's expression was one of deep, undisguised admiration. I came here to broker peace between three factions, X said, standing beside him. And you, in one afternoon, created a new one. Naruto glanced at him. It wasn't a political move. The best ones never are, X countered with a knowing smile. Don't you see what you've done, Naruto? You have and unbreakably allied yourself with the House of Gremory. You have brought the daughter of a fallen angel Kadri and a pardoned SS-class Nekosho into that house, binding their powers and their loyalties to us. You've created a new pillar of strength, a household with you at its center, that stands apart from the old guard. You have sent a message to our enemies, both ancient and new, we are not broken. We are evolving. He placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. I couldn't be happier for my sister. Or more confident in our future. We will support this union with the full backing of the four great Satans. Let the elders grumble. Their time is passing. It is time for a new age. Later that night, the four of them sat together in the large suite of rooms assigned to them. The tension was gone, replaced by a comfortable, peaceful intimacy. Kaneko was curled up asleep on a sofa, leaning against her sister's side, a picture of pure contentment. Rias was leaning against Naruto's right, her head resting on his shoulder. Akeno was on his left, pouring tea for them all. Kuroka sat on the floor in front of him, leaning back against his legs, her tail swishing lazily. A triple wedding, Rias mused, a dreamy smile on her face. The underworld has never seen such a thing. It will be complicated. It will be ours, Akeno said, handing Naruto a cup of tea. Her eyes twinkled. I have some very specific ideas for the ceremony. And for the wedding night, of course. Kuroka purred in agreement from the floor. We have to ensure the line is strong, after all, Nya. Naruto just smiled, sipping his tea and enjoying the peaceful, domestic moment. The wars were coming, darkness was stirring, and humanity was rising. The future was uncertain and fraught with peril. But looking at the women around him, his partners, his fiancés, his family, he felt no fear. They were his heart, and he was their vow. Together, they were ready for anything. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Onslaught of the Forgotten. The day of the wedding dawned not with the underworld's usual twilight, but with an artificial, brilliant sun. X had decreed it, a symbol of a new beginning. The ceremony was to be held in a specially created pocket dimension, a breathtaking reconstruction of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a neutral ground of legendary beauty chosen to host an event of unprecedented significance. Lowers that shimmered with magical light bloomed on every surface, and waterfalls cascaded into crystal-clear pools. Devils, angels, and fallen angels mingled in the grand plaza, their traditional animosities set aside for this one day. The Archangel Michael was in attendance, his golden wings folded in a gesture of peace. Azazel was there, looking uncharacteristically formal in a tailored suit, a flask peeking from his inner pocket. The leaders of all the great devil houses had come, their curiosity and political calculations masked by polite smiles. They were all here to witness the unthinkable, the union of a Grimoire heiress, a Himahima half-breed, a pardoned stray, and the mysterious powerhouse who had brought them all together. In a quiet chamber away from the throng, Naruto stood before a full-length mirror, adjusting the cuffs of his attire. It was not a traditional suit, but a custom-made black formal coat with high collars, subtly embroidered with a deep crimson swirl on the back, a nod to his origins. It was simple, elegant, and utterly him. The door slid open, and Rias entered. She was a vision in a gown of the deepest Grimoire red, the fabric shimmering like liquid rubies. Her hair was intricately styled, adorned with small, glowing blossoms. She stopped, her blue-green eyes drinking him in, a soft, genuine smile gracing her lips. "Nervous?" she asked, her voice a gentle tease. "No," he answered honestly. Turning to face her, he reached out, his fingers lightly touching the blossom in her hair. "Just making a memory." His past life had been a whirlwind of survival and war. He'd never had a moment like this, a moment of pure, undiluted peace and joy. He was determined to savor it. "Good," she whispered, leaning in to give him a soft, lingering kiss. "Because today is just for us. The politics, the wars, they can wait." As she left, another figure appeared in the doorway. Akeno. She was breathtaking in a stunning, pure white kimono, the traditional attire of a Shinto bride, but with accents of deep violet and black that hinted at her fallen angel heritage. It was a perfect fusion of her two halves, a statement of self-acceptance she never would have made months ago. Era. It's bad luck to see one bride before the ceremony, let alone three," she purred, gliding into the room. Her smile, however, was soft, devoid of its usual sadistic edge. "But I couldn't resist. I had to see the man who finally tamed my thunder." She came to a stop before him and adjusted his collar, her fingers brushing against his neck. Her touch sent a familiar, pleasant crackle of electricity through him. "Thank you, Naruto-kun," she said, her voice serious for a moment. "For seeing all of me. And for not being afraid of it." "There's nothing to be afraid of," he said simply. Her smile turned mischievous. "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that. Wait for the honeymoon." She gave him a quick, electrifying kiss on the cheek and departed, her laughter echoing softly in the hall. Finally, Kuroka slipped into the room, silent as a cat. She wore a stunning black kimono embroidered with golden clouds, a design that spoke of both knight and royalty. Her twin tails swished nervously behind her, the only sign of her unease. "Don't you dare say I look nice, NYA, she muttered, avoiding his gaze. "I feel like a trussed-up bird." Naruto chuckled. "You look beautiful, Kuroka." She finally looked at him, her golden eyes wide and surprisingly vulnerable. It's a lot. All these people staring, judging. The name Grimoire, it feels heavy." He stepped forward and took her hands in his. They were trembling slightly. "It's not Grimoire. It's not Uzumaki. It's ours. We're not joining a house, we're building one. And its foundation is you, me, Rias, and Akeno. Nothing else matters." She stared at their joined hands, and a slow, genuine smile spread across her face. She leaned in and gave him a quick, fierce kiss. "All right, husband-to-be. Let's go get this over with so we can get to the fun part." The ceremony itself was held on the highest tier of the gardens, under the boughs of a colossal, glowing tree. Circex, in his full regalia as Lucifer, stood before them as the officiant. Naruto waited at the altar. Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka walked down the aisle together, a united front, a breathtaking trinity of red, white, and black. A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't a man taking 3 wives, it was 4 individuals forging a single, powerful entity. Cirzex's voice boomed with quiet authority, his words echoing through the silent garden. He spoke of the old ways and the new, of alliances not of blood but of will. He spoke of the courage it took to build something new in a world threatened by tradition and fear. Then, it was their turn. They had decided against traditional, repetitive vows. Instead, they would each offer a single, binding promise. Rias turned to Naruto, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I, Rias Grimoire, vow to be your shield, my power, my name, and my heart will stand between you and any who would wish you harm. I am yours. Akeno was next, her voice clear and strong. I, Akeno Himahima, vow to be your sword. My lightning will strike down your enemies, my light will guide you through the darkness, and my love will be your strength. I am yours. Kuroka stepped forward, her gaze firm and unwavering. I, Kuroka Tuju, vow to be your anchor. When you wander, I will be your way home. My loyalty will be your certainty, and my life will be your fortress. I am yours. Then, all three turned to face him, waiting. Naruto looked at each of them. His heart full, he drew a deep breath, his voice resonating with the quiet, absolute power that was his alone. And I, he began, vow to be your world. It was in that perfect, sacred moment that the world broke. A sound ripped through the pocket dimension, not a sound of the ears, but a sound of the soul. It was a high, thin scream, like reality itself being torn like paper. The artificial sun flickered and died, plunging the beautiful garden into a terrifying, unnatural twilight. The shimmering flowers withered into black dust, and the cascading waterfalls turned to a thick, oily sludge. Panic erupted among the guests. Searsex's aura flared, a crimson bastion against the encroaching wrongness. Azazel and Michael were instantly on their feet, their own powers flaring to life. But it was too late. All across the pristine garden, the air began to shimmer and tear open. They weren't teleportation circles or magical gateways. They were jagged, bleeding wounds in the fabric of space. And from them, the army of Erebus poured forth. There were the hounds of shadow they had faced before, but they were just the vanguard. Behind them came larger, more terrifying things. Beings of shifting, geometric shapes that defied logic, their limbs ending in blades of solidified void. Hulking brutes that seemed to be made of cracked, ancient stone, weeping the Sam. Oily black sludge that now fouled the rivers. Their presence was a poison, and the very ground blackened and died where they trod. Erebos sends his regards. A familiar, cultured voice boomed from the largest of the rifts. The silver-haired herald stood there, a condescending smile on his face, his violet eyes glowing with malicious glee. He felt this momentous occasion deserved a proper wedding gift. The gift of oblivion. Before any of the faction leaders could mount a coordinated response, the herald raised a hand. The rifts pulsed, and a wave of pure, negative energy, far more potent than the technology Aegis had used, washed over the garden. It didn't nullify magic, it corrupted it. A high-ranking devil unleashed a torrent of fire, only for the flames to turn black and twist back, consuming him. An angel summoned a spear of light, which shattered into shards of despairing darkness. The primordial energy was rewriting the rules of reality on a fundamental level. But as the wave of corruption washed over the altar, it met a wall. A calm, golden light radiated from Naruto, a perfect sphere of sage energy that shielded him and his three brides. The corrupting influence hissed and recoiled from it, unable to touch the pure life force of the world itself. Rias, Akeno, Kuroka. Naruto's voice cut through the rising panic, a clarion call of absolute command. This is our wedding. No one is crashing it. The shock on their faces was instantly replaced by furious determination. Their wedding attire, symbols of peace and love, now seemed like battle armor. Akeno, you have the advantage. Naruto ordered. Holy power is our best weapon. Full aerial assault. Don't let them build momentum. With pleasure. Akeno snarled. 12 black wings, a sight she rarely revealed, erupted from her back. She shot into the sky, a Valkyrie of vengeance. The sky crackled as she gathered her power, not just holy lightning, but a fusion of light and shadow, a storm of her complete self. Spears of golden lightning rained down, each one obliterating the lesser primordial creatures. Rias, your destruction is being consumed, Naruto said, his eyes never leaving the battlefield. Don't try to erase them. That's their nature. Overload them. You are the power of destruction. Be a flood, not a scalpel. Rias's eyes blazed with understanding. She raised her hands, and a crimson aura exploded around her. She wasn't aiming at a single target. She unleashed a wave of raw, untamed power, a tsunami of destructive force that didn't try to unmake the creatures but simply filled their void. Like natures with so much energy that they imploded under the sheer pressure. Kuroka, you're the fastest thing here. Don't engage directly. Disrupt. Harass. Use your portals to get the non-combatants out of here. Prioritize the children. Kuroka's eyes flashed. She gave him a sharp nod. On it, NYA. She became a black and gold blur, her spatial magic tearing open small, safe gateways. She would appear, shove a group of panicked civilians through a portal back to the Grimoire castle, and then vanish before the lumbering primordial brutes could even turn to face her. With his brides executing their roles perfectly, Naruto turned his attention to the true threat. The Herald. He vanished from the altar and reappeared directly in front of the main rift, blocking the enemy commander's path. The Herald's smile widened. The anomaly. My master will be so pleased to study your corpse. He raised a hand, and a sword of pure, condensed nothingness formed in his grip. Naruto didn't summon a weapon. He simply entered a taijutsu stance, his body glowing with the golden light of his sage mode. Your master can get in line, he said calmly. The two of them clashed. It was a battle of opposing philosophies. The Herald's every move was designed to erase, to unmake. His void sword left trails of dissipating reality in its wake. Naruto's every move was about life, about overwhelming presence. His fists, coated in sage energy, struck with the force of mountains. Where the Herald's sword cut, Naruto's fists restored, the golden energy mending the small rips in space the blade left behind. They were too fast for most of the guests to follow. A blur of gold and violet. While they fought, the greater battle raged. Searsex and Michael had managed to create a stable defensive line, their own men's powers working to counteract the corrupting field. Azazel led the Grigori in targeted strikes, analyzing the enemy's weaknesses on the fly. The Herald backflipped away from a powerful axe kick that cracked the very ground. You are powerful, I'll grant you that, he said, not even breathing heavily. But you are one, and we are endless. As if on cue, the rifts pulsed again, and a new wave of even larger, more grotesque creatures began to pour through. The defensive line of the three factions began to buckle under the sheer numbers. Naruto saw it. He knew he couldn't win a war of attrition. He had to close the gates. He broke off his engagement with the Herald, appearing in the sky above the battlefield. He brought his hands together in a familiar seal. Sage art. Massive Rasengan barrage. He created a dozen clones in midair. Each one formed a Rasengan, but these were different. They were infused with the golden light of sage energy, turning them into miniature suns. The clones hurled the attacks, not at the creatures, but at the rifts themselves. When the spheres of pure life energy struck the bleeding wounds in reality, the effect was immediate. The primordial energy that sustained the rifts was violently repelled. The rifts shrieked and began to shrink, cauterized by the holy fire of Senjutsu. The Herald's eyes widened in fury. No, you will not deny my master his tribute. He abandoned the battle and shot toward the largest, central rift, trying to keep it open with his own power. Oh no, you don't. Naruto appeared in his path, a Rasen Shuriken already screaming in his hand. This one was not small and controlled. It was a massive, golden shuriken of wind and life, a spinning vortex of absolute power. He threw it. The Herald raised his void sword to block. The Rasen Shuriken was not a physical attack to be parried. The countless microscopic blades of wind and sage energy struck him, bypassing his defenses and shredding his connection to the primordial energy. He screamed, his form flickering and dissolving as the life energy tore apart his being of pure darkness. My master will feast on your world, he hissed, and then he was gone, his last Zens devoured by the Rasen Shuriken as it continued on its path and slammed into the final, closing rift. With a deafening implosion of sound and light, the last gateway was sealed. Silence descended upon the hanging gardens of Babylon. The remaining primordial creatures, cut off from their source of power, dissolved into black dust. The battle was over, but the cost was immense. The beautiful garden was a ruined, blackened wasteland. Dozens of guests were dead, hundreds more injured. The wedding, a symbol of hope and a new beginning, was now the site of the first major battle in a war for their very existence. Naruto landed softly in the center of the devastation. Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka, their beautiful wedding attire now torn and stained with dust and ichor, rushed to his side. They stood together, the four of them, a single, unbroken unit in the midst of the wreckage. They looked out at the destruction, at the terrified and wounded faces of their friends and allies. The celebration was over. Their honeymoon would be a war. Naruto reached out, taking Rias's hand. She squeezed it tightly, her knuckles white. He looked at the faces of his new wives, seeing not fear, but a cold, hard, unshakable resolve that mirrored his own. "He wanted to give us a wedding gift," Naruto said, his voice low and dangerous, a promise spoken to the silent, watching cosmos. "Well, we're going to give him our reply." Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Human Factor and a Moral Crossroads. The aftermath of the battle was a silent, gray hell. The vibrant life of the Hanging Gardens had been replaced by a landscape of ash and oily black residue. Medics from all three factions moved through the wreckage, their healing auras a stark contrast to the lingering aura of primordial death. The dead were shrouded in white, their bodies laid in solemn rows. The wounded whispered in tents, their pain a low, constant hum beneath the shocked silence. Naruto stood with Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka on a scorched overlook, the ruined altar behind them. Their wedding clothes were gone, replaced by practical combat attire. The joy of the ceremony felt like a memory from another lifetime, a dream torn apart upon waking. Sirzex, Michael, and Azazel stood nearby, a grim trinity surveying their shared failure. "Initial casualty reports are in," Sirzex said, his voice flat, stripped of its usual warmth. 37 dead, 112 wounded, 17 critically. They were mostly non-combatants, lesser lords, their families. "They were targeted," Azazel added, crouching to examine a patch of blackened ground. He picked up a fragment of what looked like solidified shadow, which dissolved in his fingers. "The attack wasn't random. It was designed for maximum psychological impact. They hit us at a moment of symbolic unity. And they butchered our weakest. This wasn't just a battle, it was a statement of terror." Michael's serene face was etched with a sorrow so deep it seemed to age him. Quote, "To use the void as a weapon, it is the ultimate blasphemy against creation itself. Erebus is not a conqueror. He is an eraser." Naruto said nothing. He simply watched as a young devil boy, no older than 10, cried over the shrouded form of his mother. He felt the cold, familiar weight of command settle over him. This was the price of war. A price he had hoped he would never have to pay again. His fists clenched at his sides. A silent promise of retribution forming in the core of his being. They returned to the Grimoire estate, the atmosphere thick with a grief that words could not touch. The LLS that had buzzed with wedding preparations were now silent, funereal. In their private chambers, the four of them moved in a shared, somber dance. Kuroka methodically cleaned and sharpened a set of kunai she had produced from a storage seal. Akeno stared blankly out a window, her reflection a pale ghost in the glass. Rias paced, her movements sharp and agitated, a caged tiger of fury and grief. Naruto sat on a sofa, a still point in their swirling emotions. He let them process, knowing that comfort and platitudes were useless against a pain this raw. He was their anchor, his calm presence a silent testament that even in this devastation, they were not alone. It was Rias who finally broke, her pacing stopping as she whirled to face him, her eyes blazing. "We should have been prepared. We knew about Erebus. We should have had more guards, better defenses. It wouldn't have mattered," Kuroka said without looking up from her work, her voice raspy. "His forces don't travel, they arrive. They tear reality a new one and walk through. No wall can stop that. We were fighting the battlefield itself. Then what do we do?" Akeno asked, turning from the window, her voice hollow. "How do you fight an enemy who can attack anywhere, anytime, without warning?" It was the question hanging over all of them, over their entire world. And then, the world answered. Not with a solution, but with a second, devastating blow. Every magical communication circle in the room flared to life at once. Simultaneously, the large viewing screen on the wall, used for underworld news, flickered on. They were not alone. Across the human world, every television, every computer monitor, every phone screen, lit up with the same, unsolicited broadcast. The face of Director Castiel Vance appeared, his expression calm, somber, and deeply concerned. He stood in a sterile, white command center, the Aegis insignia, the broken halo pierced by a sword, displayed prominently behind him. "My fellow citizens of the world," he began, his voice a balm of measured reason. Just hours ago, a catastrophic event of unknown origin occurred. While its source has been deliberately hidden from you by the powers that be. Our sources have confirmed it was yet another violent clash in the endless, secret war being waged by the supernatural entities who live among us. Behind him, footage began to play. Grainy, shaky video of the attack on the wedding. It showed the rifts tearing open, the monstrous creatures pouring out, the explosions of magic. It was edited masterfully, showing only the chaos and destruction, none of the context, none of their defense. It looked like Armageddon. For too long, Vance continued, his voice full of feigned regret, our governments have been complicit in hiding the truth. They have made deals with these devils. These angels, these so-called gods, trading your safety for their silence. The Aegis Initiative was formed to correct this. To be humanity's shield. Today, that shield was put to the test. The scene changed. It now showed a clean, high-tech containment facility. In a series of brightly lit cells, held in place by glowing blue restraints, were captured supernatural beings. A low-ranking devil family. A captured fallen angel scout, a dryad torn from her forest. They were terrified, helpless. In the chaos, we were able to intervene and secure several of these entities, Vance said. His voice hardening with resolve. They are a clear and present danger to us all. Their very existence invites this kind of apocalyptic violence into our world. His gaze then seemed to pierce the screen, to look directly at Naruto. The footage behind him changed again, showing a grainy, enhanced clip from the summit attack. It showed Naruto, a blur of motion, effortlessly disabling Vance's elite soldiers. This violence is escalating, Vance declared. And we have identified a nexus of that escalation. An unclassified biological weapon of immense power, an anomaly who calls himself Naruto Uzumaki. He is the catalyst. His presence provokes conflict on a scale we cannot hope to contain. The camera zoomed in on Vance's face. His expression was now one of grim necessity. The look of a man forced to make a terrible but righteous choice. Therefore, I am issuing this ultimatum. Not to the secret councils of devils or angels, but to the anomaly himself. Naruto Uzumaki. Why? Oh, you have 24 hours to surrender yourself to the custody of the Aegis Initiative. If you do, these captured beings will be humanely detained. If you refuse, we will be forced to begin a public, systematic purge for the good of humanity. We will cleanse this world of the supernatural threat, one by one, starting with them. The choice is yours. One life, for thousands. The clock is ticking. The broadcast cut out, leaving his final words hanging in the silent room like a death sentence. The fury that erupted was immediate and absolute. He can't be serious. Rias roared, her crimson aura flaring around her. He's holding innocent people hostage. He's a terrorist. It's a trap. NYA, Kuroka snarled, her claws extending. A damn trap. He doesn't want you. He wants a war. If you surrender, he dissects the most powerful being to stand against him. If you don't, he gets to play the hero, murdering people and blaming you for it. Akeno's eyes were cold, her holy power and demonic energy swirling around her like a storm. Then we give him a war. We find him. We find this Director Vance and his bases, and we burn them to the ground. The debate raged, a storm of grief and fury. They were all right. It was a trap. It was a declaration of war. It was a moral checkmate. Searsex and Azazel arrived within minutes, their faces thunderous. They had seen the broadcast. To use the public airwaves. To declare a global witch hunt. Searsex was shaking with a rage he rarely showed. This is an act of war against us all. It's brilliant, is what it is, Azazel said, a grudging admiration in his tone. He's sidestepped us completely. He's not talking to the faction leaders, he's talking to the human population, and he's talking to our rogue elements. He's recruiting, and he's positioned himself as the reluctant hero. Forced to act because of the big, bad monster, Naruto. The weight of the ultimatum pressed down on Naruto. He could feel the eyes of his wives, of Searsex, of Azazel, all on him. He saw the paths laid out before him, each one a different kind of hell. Surrender, and he would be subjecting himself to vivisection, betraying the very essence of his being and leaving his family defenseless. Refuse, and he would be signing the death warrants for those prisoners, and countless more after them. The blood would be on his hands, a stain Vance would gleefully paint across the world. Attack, and they would be starting a war with the entire human race, proving Vance's every accusation correct. They would become the monsters he claimed they were. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the twilight sky of the underworld. His mind was a whirlwind, not of panic, but of ice-cold tactical analysis. He thought of Jiraiya, of the third Hokage, of the choices leaders had to make. He thought of the Kobayashi Maru, the no-win scenario. He's using classic propaganda, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the heated debate, instantly silencing the room. He's created a narrative with a clear hero, himself, and a clear villain, me. He controls the stage, the actors, and the script. He turned back to face them, his eyes calm and clear, the turmoil within him perfectly concealed. So we change the play. What are you talking about? Rias asked, her voice laced with fear. Naruto, don't even think about surrendering. I won't, he said, his gaze softening as he looked at her, at Akeno. At Kuroka, I will never leave you. He then looked at Searzex. Director Vance wants to speak to me directly. He's made himself the public face of this crusade. That's his strength, and it's his weakness. A plan began to form in his mind, audacious and incredibly dangerous. It was not about surrender, and it was not about all-out war. It was about taking control. He has given me an ultimatum on a global stage, Naruto continued, a flicker of his old, unpredictable self shining in his eyes. It would be rude not to reply on the same stage. Azazel's eyes lit up with understanding. You're going to hijack his broadcast. He started a conversation, Naruto said with a grim smile. I'm going to finish it. He wants a moral crossroads. I'll give him one. He's positioned himself on a moral high ground. I'm going to burn it down from under his feet. He turned to his wives, his decision made. I am going to meet him. But not as a prisoner. Not as a conqueror. I will go as an envoy of the world he is trying to destroy. I will force him to face me, not as a symbol, but as a person. In front of the entire world. It was a gamble of unimaginable proportions. He would be walking into the lion's den, relying on his wits and the force of his will, not just his power. He would be facing an enemy not of primordial darkness, but of human conviction. An enemy who truly believed he was the hero of the story. It was, in many ways, a more dangerous foe than Erebus himself. It's too dangerous, Rias whispered, clutching his hand. Living in fear is more dangerous, he countered softly. He's using the threat of death to control us. We cannot let him. We have to show humanity that we are not the monsters he claims we are. And I have to show him that he is. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. Then he looked at Akeno and Kuroka, a silent promise passing between them. He would not fail. He would not fall. He let go of Rias's hand and walked towards the communication center of the estate, Azazel at his heels, already working on the technical logistics of a global broadcast hijack. The world had been given a choice by Director Vance. Now, Naruto Uzumaki was about to give them another one. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Alliance of Unlikely Heroes. The Grimoire communication chamber had been transformed into a war room. Azazel, a manic gleam in his eyes, worked with frantic energy, his fingers flying across a holographic interface of his own design. Wires and magical conduits snaked from his console, plugging directly into the estate's power systems. Searzex stood behind him, a silent, crimson pillar, pouring his own immense demonic energy into the system to power what Azazel was building. Standard magical frequencies are too easy to trace, too easy to block. The fallen angel leader muttered, more to himself than anyone else. But if we piggyback the signal onto the subspace frequency of the human satellite network and use a cascading encryption key powered by a Satan, they won't be able to shut us down without crashing their entire global communications grid. He wants a stage. We'll give him the whole damn world. Naruto stood in the center of the room, a circle of glowing runes on the floor around him. It was a projection circle, but one modified by Azazel to be a two-way street. He wasn't just sending a message, he was going to create a solid, interactive hologram of himself. It was the ultimate statement. I am not hiding. Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka stood just outside the circle, a wall of fierce, anxious support. Their faith in him was absolute, but the danger was palpable. He was about to make himself the most visible being on the planet, a single man standing against two looming apocalypses. All systems green, Azazel announced, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. The hijack is primed. Once we go live, they'll have about 30 seconds before they know what hit them. After that, well, it's all on you, kid. Naruto looked at his wives one last time. Rias's eyes were a storm of fear and pride. Akeno gave him a sharp, confident nod that belied the tremor in her hands. Kuroka's expression was a feral snarl, a promise of bloody vengeance against anyone who dared to harm him. He gave them a small, reassuring smile that spoke volumes. I will come back. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Do it. In a sterile, white command center deep in an undisclosed Aegis facility, Director Castiel Vance watched the countdown timer on the main screen. 10 minutes until his ultimatum expired. His staff moved with quiet, disciplined efficiency, monitoring global reactions. The world was in a panic, just as he had intended. Fear was the greatest weapon, and he wielded it with surgical precision. Sir, mass energy spike detected in the Japanese underworld sector, an analyst reported calmly. Looks like they're powering up for something. Vance allowed himself a small, cold smile. Let them posture. They have no move to make. Any direct attack proves my point. Anything else is just noise. 5 seconds to deadline, the analyst announced. The timer hit 0. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, every screen in the command center flickered. The face of the news anchor reporting on the crisis froze, then dissolved into static. An instant later, the static cleared, replaced by a view of the Grimoire communication chamber. What is this? Vance demanded, rising from his chair. Where is this signal coming from? Sir, it's everywhere, an engineer stammered, frantically typing. It's overriding our broadcast, piggybacking on our own encrypted network. I can't block it. On the screen, Naruto looked directly into the camera. Director Vance, he said, his voice calm and clear, echoing not just in their command center but in every home, on every phone, across the globe. You gave me an ultimatum. I'm here to give you my answer. Then, in the center of Vance's command center, the air shimmered. Particles of golden light coalesced, and in a stunning display of power, a perfect, solid hologram of Naruto faded into existence. He stood there, not as a flickering image, but as if he had physically teleported into the room. The Aegis soldiers instinctively raised their rifles, but Vance held up a hand, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and intrigue. Naruto's hologram ignored the soldiers. His gaze locked on the real Director Vance. You wanted to talk to me. So let's talk. Vance recovered quickly, his expression hardening into a mask of cold authority. He gestured for the cameras in the room to focus on the scene. He would turn this to his advantage. So, the monster comes out of its cage. You've made a foolish choice, anomaly. Now the entire world can see you for what you are. And what is that? Naruto asked, his tone conversational, disarming. A weapon of mass destruction, Vance retorted smoothly. Your existence invites chaos. The footage from your wedding is undeniable. You and your kind bring nothing but destruction. You're right, Naruto said. The admission stunned Vance into a brief silence. It was not the response he expected. You're right to be afraid. Naruto continued, his voice resonating with an empathy that was more powerful than any denial. He gestured, and the screens behind Vance flickered, now under his control. An image of a terrified human family, cowering during a stray devil attack, appeared. Your world has been a secret battleground for centuries. You have been caught in a crossfire you never understood. Your fear is justified. He then took a step forward, his expression hardening. But you, Director Vance, you are pointing your gun at the firefighters because you are terrified of the fire. The screen changed again. It now showed the faces of the prisoners Aegis held. A young devil girl, crying in her mother's arms. A frightened dryad, her skin pale and cracking away from her forest home. You speak of protecting humanity, Naruto said, his voice rising with a cold, righteous anger. But you do it by taking children hostage. You do it with propaganda and fear. You are using the tactics of a terrorist, not a savior. You claim to be a shield, but you are forging a cage, and you want to lock the entire world inside it with you. Vance's calm demeanor finally cracked. These Entities are a threat. They are the source of the fire. No, Naruto countered, his voice booming with authority. They are not. The screen behind him erupted with a new image, a projection of Naruto's own memory, raw and unfiltered. The world saw it all. The beautiful wedding, the sky tearing open, the monstrous, indescribable creatures of the void pouring out. They saw the herald of Erebus and heard his declaration of war against all of creation. They saw Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka fighting desperately not for conquest, but for survival. This is the fire, Director, Naruto said, his voice a low, dangerous growl as the footage played. A primordial god of darkness who wants to erase our world, human and devil alike. This is what we were fighting. This is the enemy that is coming for every last one of us. While we fought and bled to protect our world from oblivion, where was your shield, Director Vance? The question hung in the air, a devastating indictment. Vance's narrative was in tatters. He was no longer the protector of humanity. He was the man who was rounding up civilians while a world-ending threat was ignored. Vance's face was a mask of pure fury. He had lost control. Cut the feed. Cut it now. He roared at his technicians. We can't, sir. He's locked us out. Then destroy the hologram. The Aegis soldiers opened fire. Their energy rifles discharged, but the blasts passed harmlessly through Naruto's holographic form. He didn't even flinch. You can't fight a ghost, Director, Naruto said calmly. And right now, your argument is just as substantial. Realizing he had lost the war of words, Vance activated his contingency. You want to talk about tactics? He snarled. He pressed a button on his console. A section of the floor slid open, and a platform rose, revealing a new prisoner. A massive, lion-like creature with a noble mien, bound in glowing blue restraints. It was the familiar of the Bale clan, a powerful and respected magical beast. Let's see how you handle a live demonstration, Vance shouted. He aimed a remote at the creature. This device will overload its magical core. It will detonate with the force of a small tactical nuke. Surrender now, or I will wipe this entire facility. And everyone in it, off the map. It was a madman's move, a desperate, final gambit. But as he spoke, alarms blared throughout the facility, not for a broadcast hijack, but for a physical breach. In the House of Bale's territory, Saraorg Bale, the young, muscle-bound heir, had been watching the broadcast, his fists clenched. He was a man who believed in pure, unadulterated power and strength of will. He despised politics and trickery. He had watched with growing disgust as Vance used hostages and lies, and with a dawning respect as Naruto met those lies head-on with truth and conviction. That man, Uzumaki. He has the spirit of a true warrior, Saraorg had growled to his peerage. And this Vance is a coward who tortures animals. He had pointed at the screen showing his family's captured familiar. He has made this personal. Kuisha, find that signal's point of origin. We are going hunting. Now, as Vance made his final, desperate threat, the reinforced wall of the command center exploded inwards. Saraorg Bale himself stood in the breach, his demonic energy flaring like a physical sun, his fists crackling with raw power. His peerage, his queen Kuisha Abaddon at his side, poured into the room behind him. Aegis, Saraorg roared, his voice the sound of an earthquake. You have taken something that belongs to the House of Bale. I am here to take it back. With interest, the live global broadcast descended into pure chaos. The world was now watching a three-way conflict. Naruto's hologram, a calm, untouchable specter of truth. Director Vance, a cornered rat. His authority and composure shattered, and Saraorg Bale, a physical incarnation of demonic fury, tearing through the elite Aegis soldiers like they were made of paper. Naruto's hologram turned its attention from Vance to the battle. He used the chaos to deliver his final, devastating point to the world. Look closely, his voice commanded, cutting through the sounds of battle. You see a devil, Saraorg Bale, fighting to liberate his companion. You see a human, Director Vance, willing to kill his own men and an innocent creature to make a point. And you see me, an anomaly, trying to show you the truth. He looked directly into the main camera, his gaze piercing, speaking to every single person watching. This is the real choice. Not my life for the hostages. The choice is between fear and courage. Between the lies of men like Vance who would divide us, and the truth that we are all, human, devil, angel, in this fight for survival together. The darkness is coming. Choose who you will stand with when it arrives. His gaze shifted back to the now panicked Director Vance, who was being shielded by his few remaining soldiers from Saraorg's onslaught. Release the prisoners, Naruto commanded, his voice dropping to an ice-cold whisper. This is your only warning. The next time we meet, Director, it will not be a conversation. With that, his hologram dissolved into particles of golden light and vanished. Azazel cut the feed. The world was left with the chaotic, live image of Saraorg Bale's forces overrunning a top-secret military installation, a sight that shattered any remaining illusion of Aegis's invincibility. Back in the Grimoire communication chamber, the projection circle faded. Naruto stumbled for a second, the mental and energetic strain of the ordeal hitting him all at once. Rias and Akeno were instantly at his side, supporting him. Kuroka stood guard at the door, her eyes blazing, ready to defend him from any threat. The room was silent for a beat, and then Azazel let out a whoop of triumphant laughter. You magnificent bastard, you did it. You didn't just beat him, you politically and ideologically disemboweled him on live television. A communication circle flared on the floor. It was Saraorg Bale. He was bruised, his clothes torn, but his eyes were shining with the thrill of battle. Uzumaki, he said, the name a mark of respect. That was a good fight. My familiar is safe. Aegis is in retreat, but you and I are not allies. I know, Naruto said, his breathing evening out. The real enemy is this Erebus, Saraorg continued, his expression turning serious. When that battle comes, the House of Bale will be there. We fight for strength, and there is no strength in extinction. Try not to die before then. The circle closed. A new, powerful, and dangerously unpredictable alliance had been forged in the fires of chaos. Later, as they were analyzing the recovered data from the raid that Saraorg had sent them, Azazel suddenly froze. Wait a minute, he murmured, zooming in on the energy signature of the nullification device Aegis had used. This is impossible. What is it? Naruto asked, coming to look over his shoulder. He frequency dampener Aegis uses. It's based on a null energy field, Azazel explained, his mind racing. But there's a resonance signature in its core programming. A sort of echo. A power source. He ran a diagnostic, and a new waveform appeared on the screen, a sickly, disturbing purple. It's a match. It's the same energy signature we found in Valerius's lab. The energy of Erebus. The room went cold. The revelation was a final, horrifying piece of the puzzle falling into place. Aegis wasn't just a separate threat. Their advanced, anti-supernatural technology wasn't entirely human. It was being fueled or guided by the very primordial darkness they were all supposed to be fighting. Their two wars were, and perhaps always had been, the same. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Siege of Tartarus. The revelation hung in the Grimoire war room like a shroud. Aegis and Erebus were not two separate fronts. They were a pincer movement, one claw forged of human fear and the other of primordial nihilism. Both closing in on the throat of their world. The silence was broken by Azazel, who slammed a fist down on his console, his expression a terrifying mix of intellectual fury and grim understanding. It all makes sense, he hissed, pointing at the overlapping energy signatures on the screen. Erebus doesn't have a strong enough foothold in our reality to manifest his full power. He's a whisper, a ghost. So he found a vessel. Not a person, but an ideology. He found Castiel Vance, a man already so convinced of his own righteousness, and gave him the tools to turn his crusade into a reality. Aegis's null energy tech isn't just powered by the void. It's a tuning fork, slowly attuning our world to Erebus's frequency, making it easier for him to break through. They are preparing the battlefield for their master's arrival, Searsex concluded, his voice dangerously low. The pieces were all there. The wedding attack was a massive expenditure of power to test their defenses and sow terror. The broadcast was a psychological weapon to turn their own world against them, to isolate them. Then we must cut the head from the snake, Michael said, his serene voice now carrying the cold weight of divine judgment. We must find Director Vance and sever this connection. As if summoned by the declaration, a communication circle flared on the floor. Saraorg Bale's image appeared, not from a Grimoire circle, but from his own. A sign of his independent power. He was already clad in battle armor, his peerage assembled behind him. I have what you need, he said, his tone devoid of pleasantries. When my forces overran Vance's facility, we took more than my familiar. My queen ripped their primary data core. It was heavily encrypted, but my bishop is a master of such things. We have the location of their central command. Azazel leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Where? Nowhere and everywhere, Saraorg replied. It's a mobile, stealth-shielded fortress. A flying citadel of dreadnought-class proportions. According to their own logs, they call it Tartarus Base. It's their headquarters, their R&D lab, and the primary amplifier they use to channel whatever that purple energy is. It's the heart of their entire operation. Tartarus. The name, another echo of the forgotten pantheon, was a chilling confirmation. A full frontal assault by our combined forces would be detected from a million miles away. Searsx mused, his mind already calculating the strategic impossibilities. Then we don't use a full frontal assault, Naruto said, stepping forward. All eyes turned to him. The weight of command now sat on his shoulders as naturally as his own skin. We use a hammer and a scalpel. He looked at the hologram of Saraorg. Your forces are built for overwhelming power. You will be our hammer. The data you have must include the locations of their secondary outposts and communication relays. I need you and the combined forces of the three factions to launch a simultaneous global assault on every known Aegis installation except Tartarus Base. Draw their fleets out. Make them believe we're fighting a conventional war of territory. He then turned to Searsx, Michael, and Azazel. Your part is to lead that assault. Create a storm so loud it deafens them. Saraorg's lips curled into a fierce grin of understanding and approval. A glorious, global battle to bloody our fists. I accept. While you are all playing the grand distraction, what will you be doing, Uzumaki? Naruto's gaze swept over his wives, who had moved to stand with him, their expressions a mirror of his own resolve. We will be the scalpel, he said. We will infiltrate Tartarus Base during the chaos and cut out its heart. Hours later, the world was at war. From the skies above Kyoto to the deserts of North Africa, explosions of holy, demonic, and technological energy lit up the night. The grand alliance of unlikely heroes was a terrifying spectacle. Searsx's legions engaged Aegis fleets over Europe. Michael's angels descended like righteous meteors on their strongholds in the Americas. Azazel and the Grigori waged a shadow war, disabling communication satellites and sabotaging supply lines. And at the forefront of the most brutal fighting was Saraorg Baal, a physical god of war, punching holes through Aegis cruisers with his bare hands. High in the stratosphere, cloaked by a combination of Kuroka's spatial warping and Azazel's most advanced stealth technology, a small transport ship drifted silently through the upper atmosphere. Inside, Naruto, Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka stood ready. The mood was tense, the calm before the plunge. Rias, clad in lightweight crimson armor, was reviewing the schematics of the fortress that Saraorg had provided. The main power core is located in the command bridge, directly below Vance's throne room. It's a closed system, shielded by its own localized null energy field. Even if we get inside, getting to the core will be a gauntlet. Global battle is forcing them to divert power to their external shields and fleets, Akeno said, her hands crackling with contained holy lightning. She wore a battle cleric outfit, designed for mobility. That's our window. The internal defenses will be at their minimum. Naruto placed a hand on each of their shoulders, drawing their attention. He didn't offer a grand speech. He didn't need to. He looked into their eyes. A silent conversation passing between the four of them. A reaffirmation of the vows they'd made amidst the wreckage of their wedding. They were a single entity, four parts of one whole. This was their first true mission as a family. Kuroka, he said, his voice low. Get us in. Kuroka nodded, her golden eyes narrowed in concentration. She closed them, her senses reaching out, feeling for the subtle fluctuations in the fortress's shielding. Saraorg's relentless assault on the outer hull was creating momentary ripples, tiny tears in the fabric of its defense. There, she hissed. It's unstable, but it's an opening. This is going to be rough, NYA. She thrust her hands forward, tearing a hole not in the ship, but in the space in front of them. A swirling, chaotic portal appeared, showing a brief, dizzying glimpse of a metallic corridor on the other side. Go now. They leapt through without hesitation. The transit was violent, a lurching, tearing sensat ion as they were squeezed through a crack in reality. They stumbled out onto the deck of a cold, sterile corridor inside Tartarus base, the portal snapping shut behind them with an audible crack. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the entire corridor lit up with red alert lights, and automated machine gun turrets descended from the ceiling. So much for minimum defenses, Akeno quipped dryly. The battle for Tartarus had begun. They moved as one. Rias unleashed a concentrated sphere of destruction that vaporized the first set of turrets. Naruto was a blur, running along the walls and dismantling the next set with precise, energy-infused strikes before they could even acquire a target. Kuroka's movements were a chaotic, unpredictable dance, her small portals redirecting incoming fire back at the emitters. Akeno flew above them, her lightning arcing down to fry the central control panels, silencing an entire section of the hallway. They were a storm of perfectly synchronized violence, clearing corridor after corridor. Their progress a testament to their time training together. They were not four individuals fighting, they were a single, four-headed weapon. As they drew closer to the center of the fortress, they encountered Vance's elite guard, soldiers clad in advanced exoskeletons. But the core principle remained. The soldiers fell, their technology no match for the seamless fusion of magic, sage art, and shinobi tactics. Finally, they blasted through the final bulkhead and arrived at the command bridge. The room was vast, circular, and cold. In the center, suspended in a cage of crackling energy, was a colossal, pulsating crystal of pure, blackish-purple energy. It was the heart of Aegis, the source of their power, and it pulsed with the malevolent, silent whisper of Erebus. On a throne-like command chair before it sat Director Castiel Vance. He was calm, his hands steepled before him. He did not seem surprised to see them. "I knew you would come," Vance said, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics. He rose to his feet. The anomaly, the Grimoire heiress, the half-breed, the stray, a perfect collection of the filth I intend to scour from this world. "It's over, Vance," Rias said, her voice ringing with authority. "Your forces are scattered, your fortress has been breached. Surrender." Vance laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Surrender, child, you still think this is a war you can win?" He gestured to the pulsating core behind him. "This is not a weapon. It is a revelation. Lord Erebus has shown me the truth. Your world of chaotic, emotional, supernatural filth is a disease. The only cure is order. The perfect, silent, absolute order of the void. You traded your humanity for a cage built by a monster." Naruto called out, stepping forward. "I have ascended," Vance roared, his eyes glowing with a faint purple light. "He has granted me the power to bring about a new age of peace. A world cleansed of a chaos you can't even comprehend." He slammed his hand down on his console. A suit of sleek, black power armor, etched with the same sickly purple runes as the core, descended from the ceiling and encased him. It was a terrifying fusion of HYPER advanced technology and primordial magic. "Now," the armored Vance boomed, his voice a distorted synthesis of man and machine, "you will see the face of true order." He charged, moving with unnatural speed. He wielded a blade of solidified void, identical to the one the Herald had used. Naruto met him head-on, his arms coated in golden sage energy. The clash of their blows sent shockwaves through the bridge. Rias and Akeno unleashed their attacks, but the armor seemed to absorb the punishment, the void energy repairing the damage almost instantly. "It's being powered directly by the core," Rias shouted. "We can't out-damage its regeneration. Then we break the circuit." Akeno yelled. She flew up, her hands crackling with holy lightning, the one energy source the void could not easily consume. She unleashed a torrent of golden bolts, not at Vance, but at the conduits connecting the armor to the energy field around the core. The conduits exploded in a shower of sparks. Vance's armor flickered, and he roared in fury, swatting Akeno out of the air. She crashed against a console, stunned. Kuroka used the opening. She created a series of rapid-fire portals, causing Vance to misstep. As the ground disappeared and reappeared beneath his feet, he stumbled, his perfect form broken for a fraction of a second. It was the opening Naruto needed. He knew he couldn't destroy the armor. Vance wasn't just a man in a suit anymore. He was a belief system given form. You couldn't kill an idea with a punch. But you could introduce a new one. He focused, gathering all the sage energy he could muster. He poured it into his palm. But he didn't shape it into a weapon of destruction. He condensed it, purifying it, until it was nothing but the raw, untainted essence of life itself. The Rasang, and that formed in his hand did not spin with wind or fury, but glowed with the warm, gentle light of a newborn star. A life force Rasengan. Vance, recovered from Kuroka's trick, lunged forward for the final blow. His void blade aimed at Naruto's heart. Perish in the name of order. Naruto met the charge, thrusting his glowing sphere forward. Feel the chaos of living, Vance. The life force Rasengan met the void-powered armor. There was no grand explosion. There was only light. The golden energy didn't try to break the armor. It flowed into it, through it, and into the man inside. It was a torrent of pure life, of sensation, of emotion. For a man who had embraced the perfect silence of the void, it was the ultimate poison. Vance screamed, a raw, human sound of pure agony. He was being flooded with everything he had rejected. Hope, fear, love, rage, joy, sorrow, the messy, beautiful, chaotic symphony of life. The primordial darkness within him recoiled, burned by the sheer positivity. The armor shattered, and Castiel Vance collapsed to the floor, catatonic, his eyes wide and staring at a truth his mind could no longer handle. The crystal core behind them, its champion defeated, began to pulse violently. Its energy spiraling out of control. We need to go, Rias yelled. The whole fortress is going to implode. A communication circle crackled to life on Naruto's wrist. It was Saraorg. External defenses are down. The fortress is yours. Now blow it to hell. Naruto ran to the core's main console. He didn't need to understand the technology, he just needed to overload it. He poured his own energy into the system, forcing the self-destruct sequence. Kuroka, get us out. She nodded, her hands already tearing a new portal open, this one leading back to their ship. Akeno, recovered, helped a bruised Rias through. Kuroka followed. Naruto was about to leap through when the dying core let out a final, silent, psychic scream. It wasn't a wave of energy, it was a thought, a message. Projected from the depths of the void directly into his mind. It was not the voice of a herald or a servant. It was the voice of Erebus himself, a being of unimaginable age and cosmic coldness. I see you, little Echo. You have broken my toy. You have roused me from my slumber. Now, you will witness my waking. And your flawed, noisy little world will be the first to greet my eternal silence. The voice vanished, leaving an imprint of absolute, soul-crushing dread. Naruto shook it off, his jaw set, and leapt through the portal an instant before Tartarus base collapsed in on itself, not in an explosion of fire, but in a silent, terrifying implosion of reality, leaving nothing behind but a warp in space. They had won. They had defeated Aegis and destroyed Erebus's anchor in their world. But in doing so, they had just formally announced their existence to a sleeping god. And he was waking up. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. Dawn of a New Era. The silence in the aftermath of Tartarus Base's implosion was a living thing. It filled their small transport ship, a stark contrast to the chaotic symphony of battle that had consumed them. Below, across the globe, the remnants of the Aegis fleets, their command and control severed, were surrendering or being systematically dismantled by the unified forces of the three factions. The war with Aegis was over. But as they looked at the warp in space where the fortress had been, a scar on the skin of the sky, they all felt the cold truth. The real war was just beginning. Naruto stood by the ship's viewport, the psychic words of Erebus still echoing in the quiet corners of his mind. I see you, little Echo. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. A declaration from a being that viewed their entire reality as a fleeting dream it was about to wake from. Rias came to stand beside him, her hand finding his. Her crimson armor was dented and scorched, a testament to the ferocity of the battle. Are you all right? She asked, her voice soft. When the core imploded, I felt something. A wave of pure dread. He squeezed her hand, his gaze never leaving the cosmic wound outside. He knows we're here, he said simply. Erebus. He spoke to me. Akeno and Kuroka joined them. Their expressions grim. They had felt it too, a psychic backlash that had chilled them to the bone. So the big boss is finally waking up. Nya, Kuroka murmured, her usual B. bravado tinged with a solemnity she rarely showed. What do we do now? We prepare, Akeno said, her violet eyes hard as amethyst. Vance and his fanatics were just the termites, gnawing at the foundations. Now the storm is coming to knock the whole house down. Their return was not to the Grimoire estate, but to the grand plaza of the Babylon Pocket Dimension, the same place where their wedding had been so brutally interrupted. This time, it was not filled with flowers and panicked guests, but with the victorious, weary armies of the new Great Alliance. Devils, angels, and fallen angels stood shoulder to shoulder. Their ancient enmities burned away in the crucible of a shared battle for survival. As Naruto's ship descended, a cheer went up. It started as a low rumble and grew into a deafening roar. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated relief and triumph. They weren't just cheering for a military victory, they were cheering for the heroes who had plunged into the heart of the enemy and emerged alive. Sirzex, Michael, and Azazel met them at the foot of the ramp, their faces etched with fatigue but shining with a profound respect that transcended faction lines. Even Saraorg Bale was there. His arms crossed over his massive chest, a grudging but undeniable admiration in his eyes. The last of the Aegis resistance surrendered 20 minutes ago, Sirzex announced, his voice booming over the cheering crowd. Castiel Vance has been taken into custody. He is broken, catatonic, but alive. The war against the Aegis initiative is over. He placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder, his grip firm. You did it. You four did what our combined armies could not. You cut the cancer out so we could clean the wound, Saraorg added, his voice a low growl of approval. A warrior's victory. Azazel was already holding a data slate, his mind unable to rest. We're salvaging what we can from the wreckage of their fleets. Their technology, it's a terrifying fusion. But the core principle, the connection to this Erebus, we now know our enemy's nature. Knowledge is the first and most important weapon in any war. Naruto looked past the leaders, at the cheering soldiers, at the medics tending to the wounded. At the dawn of a new era being born from the ashes of the old. He felt the weight of Erebus's promise, the looming threat of a cosmic horror. But he also felt the strength of the people around him. His wives, his allies, this new world he had forged. This isn't over, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the celebratory noise, a sobering dose of reality. Aegis was just a symptom. Erebus is the disease. He spoke to me. He's waking up, and he's coming for us. A hush fell over the assembled leaders. The cheering of the armies in the distance seemed to fade. Michael's say, Rene's expression became one of unshakable resolve. Then we shall be ready. Humanity is now aware of our existence. We can no longer hide in the shadows. We must guide them, work with them, and stand with them against the coming night. A new council was formed that day, not of devils or angels, but of the Alliance. Sirzex, Michael, and Azazel would lead it, but a fourth seat was created. A seat. For the household that had become the linchpin of their victory, the symbol of their new, unified world. The seat was offered to Naruto. He accepted, but with one condition. I don't sit alone, he declared. My house is not one person. It is four. Where I go, my wives go. And so, it was done. Naruto, Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka became the fourth pillar of the New World Order, their voices equal to those of the great faction leaders. It was a revolution born of necessity, a testament to the fact that their strength was not in one individual, but in their unity. Weeks later, a semblance of peace had settled over the worlds. The existence of the supernatural was now public knowledge, a chaotic and terrifying truth that humanity was slowly, painstakingly beginning to accept, guided by the careful diplomacy of the new alliance. The captured Aegis prisoners, freed from Vance's ideological grip, were being deprogrammed and integrated, many of them horrified to learn they had been pawns of a primordial entity. The real work, the preparation for Erebus, was being done in secret. Azazel and his scientists worked tirelessly, reverse engineering Aegis technology to find a way to fight the void. The devils and angels trained together, developing new combat styles that fused their powers. The world was holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. In the quiet, sprawling gardens of the Grimoire estate, the four of them finally found a moment for themselves. The roses were in bloom again, their crimson petals a vibrant splash of life against the twilight sky. Kuroka was napping in a patch of sun, her cat ears twitching, completely at peace for the first time in years. Akeno was practicing a new technique, weaving holy lightning and shadow into a stable, beautiful orb of twilight energy. Rias was beside Naruto on a stone bench, her head resting on his shoulder, a book lying forgotten in her lap. "Is this what it feels like?" she murmured, her voice soft and content. "Peace. For now," he answered, watching Akeno's orb of light. "It's a borrowed peace, but we've earned it." "A new house," Rias mused, a small smile on her face. "The elders are having fits. We don't have a proper name." "We don't need one," Kuroka said without opening her eyes. "They know who we are." Akeno let her twilight orb dissipate and came to sit with them, her movements graceful. "She's right. Our name is our actions." She leaned against Naruto's other side, completing the circle. "Still, it feels strange. To go from being an outcast to one of the leaders of the world in a matter of weeks." "Power isn't about titles," Naruto said, looking at the three incredible women who were his world. "It's about the will to protect what's important. We have that, together." They sat in comfortable silence for a long time, simply being. The horrors they had faced, the battles they had won, the future they had forged, it had all led to this. A quiet moment in a garden, surrounded by family. He knew Erebus was coming. He could feel the pressure of the primordial gods awakening, a distant, gathering storm on the edge of reality. The coming battle would dwarf everything they had faced before. It would be a fight not for territory or politics, but for the right of their chaotic, noisy, beautiful world to exist. But as he sat there, with Rias on one side, Akeno on the other, and Kuroka a warm, purring presence nearby, he felt no fear. He had faced down gods and monsters in one life, and he would do it again in this one. This time, however, he wasn't a lonely outcast fighting for acknowledgement. He was a husband, a leader, a pillar of a new world. He was home. He looked up at the bruised purple sky of the underworld, at the thousand silver stars that held a silent watch. The storm was coming, yes. But he and his family, his incredible, powerful, loving wives, would be the shield that met it. They were the dawn of a new era. And they were ready. Chapter 10 End.